Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to continue hearing evidence from Ms. Dany Cotton, formerly of the London Fire Brigade. So would you ask Ms. Cotton to come back in, please? Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Cotton.
Good morning.
That's it. Take a seat, make yourself comfortable.
Thank you, sir.
All right, ready to carry on, I hope?
Yes, sir.
Very good, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Millett. Yes,
Good morning,
when
Mr.
you're
Chairman.
ready.
Good morning to you. Good morning, members of the panel. Good morning, Ms. Cotton.
Good morning, Mr. Miller.
Can we go back, please, to TCAP 0124, which we looked at yesterday, at LFB 403716? And if we go to page 8 in that document, you can see that there is a record of the decision to develop command decision exercises contained at the bottom of your screen there. Note of any key decisions made, issues raised, etc. at TSG. And if you look at the first paragraph, it makes reference to the Babcock proposal that we looked at yesterday, and it goes on in the second paragraph to say this: superseding Babcock's proposal in stage 3 below, it was not manageable to split this into separate TCAPs for each incident command course, as the proposal is to change and enhance 6 command decision exercises, CDEs, that will be used in all incident command courses. The deadline of 20th December 2013 is current and stands for the enhancement of 6 CDEs. Following this TCAP, recommendations will be made for further enhancements that will be fed into the IC course review following a meeting at Beckton Training Centre on the 10th of December 2014 regarding the enhanced incident command training based on Lacknell Inquest's Rule 43 recommendations, TCAP 124. The following points were agreed, and it goes on. And we'll look at that in a moment. Before we do, can you just help us? Why was the command decision exercise number reduced from 16 down to 6?
I think, as I said yesterday, I wasn't directly involved in the detail of any of this. I believe from what I found subsequently, it was to do with the suitability of the CDEs, and I think, once again, the detailed amount of work and the length of time it would take to develop those CDEs, but that's just what I found out subsequently. I wasn't aware of that at the time.
Now, the next block of text, as we go on to see on page 9, has some bullet points. And you can see what was agreed, as I've read to you, about a year later in 2014. And it says, first bullet point, the high-rise building within the initial demonstration was not felt to be suitable by the LFB as the main CDE to address the objectives of TCAP 124. This has now been changed to a CDE currently held by Babcock, known as Blackwall Tower. This is a high-rise block consisting of a greater number of floors and was felt better suited to the learning outcomes. In addition to this, DAC Graham Ellis felt that there was an opportunity to use a recent incident within a high-rise block which had similarities to Lacknell House as a CDE. Further work will be done on this by SM Peter Rickard, who will be supplying all of the necessary information to Babcock regarding this incident and location. As stated, although the CDE has been changed to Blackwall Tower, the LFB's ideal CDE is the high-rise incident identified by DAC Graham Ellis for this training. So it looks, is this right, that as of December 2014, there was one main CDE, command decision exercise, namely Blackwall Tower, initially. My question is, had the decision been taken only to use one command decision exercise, or was there to be one command decision exercise supported by the other 5?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that decision that was taken. I do know that when DAC Graham Ellis had attended the meeting with Babcock's where they had a conversation about the training inputs, he told me that he had made them aware of a recent operational incident that he thought would be more suitable. He did share that with me, and he was sharing that information with them, but that was all the detail I was aware of at the time.
Right. Just going back to the foot of page 8, and just picking up one or two things in your answer, you can see that there was a meeting at Beckton Training Centre on the 10th of December 2014 regarding the enhanced incident command training. Were you at that meeting?
No, I wasn't.
Can you explain why, as ACOA, you weren't at that meeting?
Yes, because the team who were the subject matter experts were those that met and discussed the detail of the TCAP. So someone from Peter Groves' team, who I believe at that point was Peter Rickard, it had been Steve Green, and then the subject matter experts, namely Mike Curran from the Health and Safety team and Neil Withers from the Operational Review team.
But none of this was reported back to you?
No, it wasn't.
And can you explain that why not?
Because the detailed work around the development of TCAPs was something that was discussed at a board that Peter Groves, I believe, sat on, but it wasn't reported back through to me.
So even though, is this right, even though you had at least nominally responsibility as ACOA for developing the command or the incident command training as a result of the coroner's recommendations, is this right? You had no oversight, no monitoring of, no input into the actual training exercises developed in order to meet the coroner's recommendations?
No, that was work that was done by DSE Graham Ellis and other members of the team.
DSE Graham Ellis was responsible he was one of your reports, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
So can you explain that why, even though he was one of your reports, he never reported any of this to you?
He did report the subsequent issue that he had raised around the fact he wasn't satisfied with the proposal that Babcock had raised, and he had suggested the more recent incident. But the day-to-day detailed work was, I don't think on any TCAP was ever overviewed by any assistant commissioner who was the sort of in charge of the commissioning department. That wasn't regular business.
No, but then Lacknell wasn't a regular business, was it? Or the response to Lacknell wasn't a regular business?
No, it wasn't, but this was still, I was aware of the work that was being undertaken, but not the detail of it.
Was Lacknell not sufficiently important for the Brigade to depart from its regular business practice and have ACs at least keep tabs from time to time on the development of the TCAP intended to be responsive to the Coroner's Rule 43 recommendations?
I had great trust and faith in my Deputy Assistant Commissioner, who was an exceedingly experienced and professional operational officer to do that work, so I did not feel the need to keep tabs on him. I knew that he would report to me if he perceived that there were any areas of concern, because he was very, very keen on the development right across the piece of all of the incident command courses.
Yes. Is that what you might call, as we've heard before elsewhere in this inquiry, reporting by exception?
Yes, that is.
How would proper, thorough, adequate supervision and monitoring by an AC over a domain for which they were responsible ever work if all you did was delegate an activity to somebody and then trust them to get on with it?
I think that we have to have trust in our very professional senior officers, because otherwise it would require an AC to do a phenomenal amount of work in scrutinising and checking across a range of their functions that I just don't think would demonstrate any trust or belief in your members of staff who I saw on a regular basis. I met with Graham Ellis on a daily, if not weekly basis, and I was aware that he would raise an issue if there was one, and I have to have trust in my professional officers.
I don't think anybody would dispute the fact that you have to have trust in your officers who report to you. What I'm more interested in is keeping yourself informed so that you know what's going on in your reporting line and to some extent in your name. Let me give you an example. If you go to page 3 of this document, you can see the different versions of this TCAP. I showed this to you yesterday. It starts on the 3rd of June 2013 with Mike Curran as the author with the first draft, and it runs to the 10th of August 2016 with Peter Rickard as the author. Now, there are a number of different versions. Would it not have been possible, and indeed sensible, I would suggest, at least for you to have seen these drafts as they evolved, even if simply for your information only by email?
I believe that, as I said, that if there had been issues, they would have been raised to me. And I'd say, once again, it's the fact that I had trust in the fact that the people who were making those amendments were working closely with subject matter experts including the people who had been involved very closely in the Lacknell House investigation, and therefore they were keeping an oversight on what was happening.
So what would happen if the Commissioner rang you up one afternoon and said to you, I'd just like to understand where the incident command training exercises have got to. I've been given some stick by the Assembly. Can I just give them something? What would you do? Would you be able to look into your desk and tell him immediately, or would you have to make your own calls?
No, I would make a call to make sure I had the most up-to-date information, and then I would return the call and give them that information. I wouldn't wish to give the Commissioner any information that I didn't believe was the most current information. Therefore, I would always take time to check that fact before I would report back. If that wouldn't happen, but if that had happened.
Yes. My point is that you wouldn't know yourself. You'd have to do your own researches, and so on down the chain till you found somebody who did know.
Yes, but it wouldn't go far down the chain. I knew who the people were who were directly involved, and therefore they would be able to give me that information. Can
we get back to page 9, come back onto track with this document? You can see I've read to you in the first bullet point, in the last few lines there's a reference to a recent event. Can you see it says, in addition to this?
Sorry, where are we?
4 lines down. In addition to this, DAC Graham Ellis felt that there was an opportunity to use a recent incident within a high-rise block which had similarities to Lacknell House's CDE. On that, is it right that that was the Holcroft House incident?
Yes, it was.
It was. And ultimately, do you recall that a CDE based on Holcroft House took the place of the Blackwall Tower CDE?
As I understand now, yes.
As you understand now. You didn't know that then?
I knew that was the one they were working towards. I didn't know that was going to completely replace Blackwall Tower. At one point, work was being done to try and prepare both of them. I knew that Holcroft House was ultimately used, but I wasn't sure if they were going to continue the work on Blackwall Tower.
Why not simply use the Lacknell House fire?
Because I think that the Lacknell House fire was already subject to the Lacknell House training package, and therefore they wanted to use another example to test those points, because the crews would already have had the Lacknell House package delivered to them, so they would be familiar with the process of the fire. Therefore, if you wanted to test an officer's ability to respond to a situation, then it's preferable to have one that's different from something they've already seen, as they might preempt their response to it because they know what the answer is effectively.
I follow. So did it work like this? Just help me. So you had the Lacknell House packages, there were 2, as we've seen, rolled out to station-based staff and senior officers in late August, or from late August 2014. There's then a decision taken, as it appears from this document, during the TCAP process, to have a command decision exercise, which would be an exercise, is this right, to test what they learned from the Lacknell House package?
To test the learning against those objectives, so not specifically to test that package, but to test against those 7 areas of the recommendation, but that, by sort of implying it, would test what they'd learnt from Lacknell House.
Right. Now, we've been looking at numbers. We saw 16, and then in the early part of this document, 6, and then 1, which was Blackwall, then changed to Holcroft House. Can I ask you to look at LFB 3033013, please? This is an email at the top of the screen from Naresh Ragbeer of Babcock to Dave Langridge, 5th of December 2013. Dave, he says, my main concern with all of this is that the deadline still stands for TCAP 0124, and we've promised the LFB that we would have 6 CDEs completed. After talking to Doug, my understanding is that the LFB require changes to accept Victoria View. If this is the case, would we be better working on this and submitting the single CDE, or 2 at the most, i.e. Victoria View and Blackwall Tower, on the 20th of December? We need implicit agreement from the LFB. This work will meet the requirements of TCAP 124 as it stands. We could then create 124A, 124B, 124C, etc. to schedule the remaining CDEs. Now, does this tell us that the decision to slim down the number of CDEs was driven by Babcock's inability to meet the deadline, the LFB's deadline?
From reading that, it would suggest that that was one of the factors in it. I would not have seen this email. Obviously, it was internal Babcock's email, but that looks like in order to meet the deadline, they were going to submit some early on and then further work, yes.
Do you remember whether you, or presumably not you, but somebody else within the LFB pushed back and insisted that the correct number of command decision exercises be developed?
That would have happened, and I think that's probably why it refers to creating further exercises, because that's what the agreement was of the TCAP.
Yes. I mean, from your knowledge, can you help us whether or not the slimming down exercise from 16 to 6 to 1 and then possibly others around that was driven by Babcock's inability to meet the LFB's deadline?
I think that was definitely a factor, yes. I mean, it was definitely very difficult and very time-consuming to get these training packages developed. That was a major factor, yes.
Now, let's look back at the TCAP then, LFB 403716, and let's look at page 10 in that document. And there on page 10, you can see in the second paragraph, the second paragraph there, the first refers to the demonstration on the 20th of December, which we saw referred to in the email. And then in the second paragraph it says, confirmation of the TCAP being closed following the successful completion of Holcroft House, that should say Holcroft House, CDE for Level 1 Incident Command was agreed in 2016. The rest of the existing elements of this TCAP have been incorporated into the ongoing Incident Command course review. Are you able to shed any light on why the CDE was restricted to Level 1 Incident Commanders when the original intention was to provide exercises for all 4 levels of Incident Command?
No, I'm not aware. I know that training was being developed for other levels of incident command. I think that it was deemed that the priority was to get this CDE developed for Level 1 because obviously they're the first level of incident command on the fire ground and the first crews that would encounter the early situation. So I think that was agreed as a priority, in addition to which there was already an existing suite of incident command assessments that were regularly undertaken for Level 2 and 3 incident commanders, whereas this was quite a new development for the assessment of Level 1.
Could I trouble you just to remind us what Level 1, how far Level 1 extends?
Certainly, sorry, sir. It's what was crew managers and watch managers is now leading firefighter support, so station-based officers, basically, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
On page 5 of this document, if we go back to that, please, you can see there's a heading, background and context. And in the second paragraph, it says, these changes, which follows on from what is said in the first paragraph about the coroner's recommendations, these changes that affect the whole range of incident command training courses needs implementing with immediate effect and not delayed due to any other TCAP or change programme. Now, Peter Groves told us in his evidence that it wasn't always possible to fast-track urgently needed changes to incident command training largely because of Babcock's limited subject matter expertise. And he said that hindered the implementation of the training programme. Then just for our reference purposes, that's day 177, page 48 to page 49, and the same day, page 55 at lines 2 to 14. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
You do. Why did it take your department more than 3 years after the coroner's recommendations in March 2013 to finalise one command decision exercise, August 2016, Holcroft House?
This obviously wasn't just the work of one department or any one person. Development of a TCAP involves a range of different departments, including mainly Babcock's, the external training provider, and Peter Groves' team, who were very involved in the oversight of development and the progression of TCAP courses. The main role of operational assurance as the commissioning department was to provide the subject matter expertise to support that development. So the fact this took so long was due to a number of departments being involved, but mainly due to the delay in the ability of Babcock's to develop that training.
To your knowledge, did anybody put a rocket under Babcock and say to them, look, normal rules don't apply here, as this sentence says very clearly, there must be no delay in developing these incident command programs. Get on with it. We can't hang around for 3 years.
Yes, I know that both in conversation, I had regular meetings with my director, Gary Reason, and he would then have meetings with his equivalent in Babcock's, and I absolutely know the subject matter of this was raised on a number of occasions. And conversations, firm, strong conversations were had about the importance of this issue.
And what was Babcock's response?
I think that at the director level that Gary Reason used to meet with, there were plenty of assurances given and that it would be prioritised, but I don't think that ever really translated into the impetus that we needed to get that moving quicker.
Let's look again at the November 2013 monitoring report. We saw it yesterday. It's at LFB 000067832, page 21 this time. You can see that this one is November 2013. We looked at it yesterday. We also saw the one for August that year, its predecessor. And the colour coding, as I showed you yesterday, demonstrates that blue is an indication that an action has been completed, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It says blue completion, so we can read that. Now, if we go to page 25, you can see that, and we need to expand that, please. Yes, thank you. You can see that the review of incident command training as against the coroner's 7 recommendations is highlighted in blue, isn't it?
It is.
In other words, complete, yes?
That's what that would indicate, but it clearly wasn't. As I said yesterday, I have no idea how that could have been marked blue because it was nowhere near complete.
Well, thank you, and you did say that, and that is what you said. But when we asked Gary Reason about this, he said that he wasn't the one to mark the action as completed, and that instead this would have been as a result of the update that was given by your commissioning department. He said that at day 181, page 82:17 to 83:10. Are you able to comment on that or tell us whether that's right or wrong?
I have to say I listened to that evidence. I was very surprised to hear him say that because he was as aware as I was that this was nowhere near completion. And this report had clearly been through ODCB, where we had reported that where we were, so it was nowhere near completion. I'm not in a position to understand who made the change of that colour to blue because all changes of actions being completed had to be agreed through ODCB. So I don't know whether that was as a result of an administrative error by someone completing it or how that happened, because both Gary Reason and I and ODCB were fully aware of the status of this action and that it was nowhere near complete.
Well, and you would agree, I assume, that as such, this was not just factually incorrect, but thoroughly misleading.
Absolutely.
You were on the ODCB.
Yes, I was.
Did you see this document at the time?
I didn't see a document marked complete, no. This is the document that would have been developed to go to the Lackland House Working Group, and I wasn't party to those documents. That was the update that Gary Reason supplied, because I would have pointed out that this should not be marked complete.
So just to be absolutely clear, you didn't see this document marked blue in or after November 2013?
Obviously, the passage of time, I cannot guarantee 100% because I can't obviously recall and I can't look back to my documents. But I do know that if I had seen it marked complete, I would have challenged it because I was fully aware that it was nowhere near complete. In fact, it had barely begun.
Can I just intervene for a moment? Do you happen to know who would have been responsible for the text in this document?
So the text, I believe, in this document would have been taken from the text of the ODCB Rule 43 actions, and Gary Reason was the one who had final sort of amendment and alteration on it, and he was the one who'd be presenting it to the Lackland House Working Group, because some of those assurances that are in there are not ones that were supplied by my department.
Well, that's one of the reasons I was asking you, because I notice in the second full paragraph, starting at the end of line 4, is a statement that Babcock has confirmed that all 7 issues are covered in the existing suite of command training. I don't know whether you can help with what the basis for that was.
Yes, sir. As I understand it, and this came from the very early review that I believe Babcock's did, that they believed that in a manner all 7 of those issues were covered, but they would need further opportunities to highlight and enhance those issues. That was the report back they gave us from their initial review, which came back through Peter Groves' team. But I think that then got more fully explored to discover that they weren't satisfactorily covered by the current suite of training, which is why there was the requirement to develop the new CDEs.
Well, exactly, because that sentence suggests that Babcock was saying you don't need any more training, you're getting it already.
And I think that's what Babcock's wanted the outcome to be, because they understood how time-consuming and difficult it might be to develop new suites of training.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Do you know, Ms. Cotton, who functionally was responsible for the colouring? Who decided it should be blue, and who actually pressed the blue button, so to speak?
I don't know who decided it should be blue. I am at a loss of words to think why anybody should decide it should be blue, because it clearly isn't, which can only lead me to believe that whoever the team were who completed the actual function of the preparing of papers and filling forms were the ones who changed it, because everybody was fully aware that it wasn't complete. So I genuinely don't know, and I'm at a loss to suggest how that could happen, because it's clearly very wrong.
Let's look at LFB 3029344. Now, this is dated December 2013, as you can see from the top right-hand corner, and it's a monitoring report of that month. And it says it's called Consolidated Action Plan Recommendations Issued to the Brigade and/or Fire and Rescue Services by Coroners Following Inquests. I think this is your update, isn't it, for the ODCB?
Yes, this is the update that my department would collate the responses from all responsible officers and submit.
Yes. Now, can we go to page 25, please, in this document? There are other parts of it, but let's look at 25. Now, we can see there, under LFB Action, introduce a case study training package to incorporate learning outcomes from inquests. It says ACOA, as the lead, as you, target date December 2013, and then there is, if you look down the page, you can see, immediately above it, I'm so sorry, you need to go to the bottom of 24. We may come back to the case study in a moment. Go back to 24. And at the bottom of 24 is review incident command training to ensure the 7 points are adequately covered. Head HRD. And HRD is what? Human Resources?
Peter Groves, so James Douglas and Peter Groves' department.
Right. And then September 2013, if you look at that, you can see that's the target date. And then if you go down to page 25, the third date in there is the 22nd of October 2013, and it says, update, all stakeholders have considered the training requirements in detail to address the coroner's recommendations. The proposed amendments to all incident command courses have now been agreed, and Babcock are developing the first command decision exercise. Now, we don't have another ODCB update until March 2014. Let's just look at that. I just want to note that. Let's have them two up at the same time. So keep that on the screen, please, if you would, Mr. Documents Director, and let's have the one from March 2014 at LFB 3085811. there it is on the right-hand side of your screen. Again, that's a document which went through your hands, isn't it?
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Can we please go to page 30? And on page 30, yes, thank you very much. You can see, again, B, review incident command, etc. And then if you turn the page to 31, it's the same item, turn to 31 and see the entry for the 3rd of March 2014. In bold, it says, completed. Babcock has confirmed that all 7 issues are covered in the existing suite of command training, albeit that there may be opportunities to emphasise the Lacknell event during some inputs. Additionally, as part of routine business, Babcock are amending a number of command decision exercises to fully reflect the issues identified by the coroner. Now, where it says that the action is completed, that wasn't right, was it?
No, I think that was reflecting the fact that Babcock's had reviewed the instant command inputs and had deemed that everything was covered. It didn't mean that the training interventions had been completed. I think it's poorly worded.
I think it's poorly worded. It went through your hands, though, although you may not have worded it yourself.
No, it went through mine and ODCB's hands, but as we've seen with a number of documents, there are times when things are very poorly worded.
Why did you allow a poorly worded document such as this to go to the ODCB when you knew it wasn't accurately reflecting the facts?
I think that it was accurately reflecting the fact they'd been through the scenarios, and then it talks about the fact that the number of CDs are being developed, and that would have been the conversation during the ODCB meeting. But I can only apologise for the poor wording. I don't recollect what happened at that time when the words were devised and when they went through, and I genuinely, the passage of time, can't recall that. But
it's not so much the words Babcock has confirmed, etc. It's the word completed. What's poorly worded about a single word completed when, in fact, what is under B was not completed?
Because I think that is referring to the fact Babcock's have reviewed the existing suite of training. That's what the completed is referring to, not that the training interventions have been developed.
Right. But it's not correct that this was completed, was it? It's not correct that a review of the incident command training to ensure the 7 points are adequately covered had been completed.
In Babcock's view, they had been completed that exercise and had deemed that the issues were being covered and that they were going to enhance them with further training. So the exercise of reviewing it in their terms had been completed, and because that, as you would have seen, that was allocated to HRD, so that was James Dalgleish and Peter Groves, that would have been the wording they had taken, I imagine, from Babcock's as an update. So Babcock supplied updates as well to this.
Can you recall any occasion when you told ODCB that incident command exercises designed to address the problems at Lacknell identified by the coroner were not complete, but were in a process of very gradual development?
Yes, it was the subject of a conversation regularly at ODCB and the frustrations of how very slow it was, and that it was taking an inordinate amount of time to develop the training packages. It was something that we talked about on a regular basis.
But in fact, given that incident command was packaged into the incident command review course, as we'll come to, it couldn't possibly be the case that the review had been completed as at March 2014, given that it was a 3-year exercise, and in fact was not completed even at 2016.
So I think the review was completed. We saw a document, I believe it was yesterday, where they'd identified a number of interventions, but what wasn't completed was the training outcomes at the end of that. So the outcome in 2016 wasn't the fact the review hadn't been done, it was the fact that we hadn't completed producing the different levels of training for different officers in instant command.
Well, when was the review completed, to the best of your knowledge?
I genuinely can't remember, I'm sorry, but I think we looked at it in a document yesterday where they had been through, they'd used Doug Massey to go through a number of the training interventions and documents. So it was, it's wording, isn't it? It's wording about a review as opposed to the delivering of the product, which was the training, which was the requirement.
Let's look at the Holcroft House training package, which was, I think, a set of training materials ultimately produced in response to the incident command recommendations from the coroner. That is at BAB 6011, please. And we can see from the front page that it is called Holcroft House Commanded Decision Exercise, with a subtitle, Developing High-Rise Fire Scenario, Mass Evacuation, Persons Reported with Fire Survival Calls, Crew and Watch Manager. So just pausing there, this is a level 1 training exercise.
It is.
Yes. Incident Management Training Trainer Guide. So this is a guide for the trainers. Now, if we look at the foot of the page, which you can't quite see, if we can scroll down to the bottom, the issue date is marked with some hashtags. Do you know when it was issued?
No, I have no idea.
Did you or your department develop and sign this off?
This was part of TCAP 0124. So it would have been involving the same people we were discussing earlier in the development of the training package. I'm not sure who ultimately signed it off or when it was signed off.
Did you ever see it before it was signed off?
No, I don't believe I did.
What about Graham Ellis? Presumably
Yes,
he would have
did.
done.
Yes, absolutely.
Did he ever tell you, even informally, that he had signed off on a command decision exercise covering these matters designed for level 1 officers?
I remember having conversations with him about the development. I don't recall whether we had the specific conversation around the issue of sign-off.
Let's go to the detail of the scenario. Can we start at page 6, please? And you can see what the exercise scenario is. Holcroft House is situated in Ingrave Street, Battersea, SW11. It is a traditional concrete-built high-rise block of residential flats, constructed circa unknown, and is situated in the London Borough of Wandsworth, southwest London. The building consists of 9 floors and is approximately 110 metres by 14 metres. There are 128 flats, separated into 16 flats per floor. The building is undergoing limited remedial work, communal areas are being redecorated, and a number of doors are being replaced. Fire crews are aware from previous calls to this address that the dry rising mains are often found to be vandalised and that lobby doors are frequently wedged open or even removed. Parking is always an issue, with access to fire appliances restricted or impossible. The incident is initiated with a call to smoke issuing from the second floor. Several additional calls are received, indicating that the fire is on the second floor. On arrival, it is apparent that the fire is on the 4th floor. This incident increases in complexity to involve persons reported, fire survival calls, significant fire growth, and mass evacuation, compounded by the hazards and risks associated with the remedial building works. This will create significant challenges for CM and WM delegates. Now, importance in the last paragraph there is not only fire survival calls, but significant fire growth and mass evacuation. You see those 2 features of this CDE. Can we then move to page 8 and look at section 1.8 on that page? This is under delegate learning outcomes. You can see that the Coroner's 7 Rule 43 Incident Command training recommendations and exercise injects are said to correlate to each of the 7 recommendations. You see?
I do.
Now, we'll look at some of those injects in a little bit of detail shortly. We can find a summary of them for assistance at page 12, if we can go to that. Page 12, there is a table, and if you study that carefully, you will see 2/3 of the way down that there are 2 fire survival guidance calls, inject 53 and inject 55, yes?
Yes.
And it may be that that is only one fire survival guidance call, 1 or 2. Do you accept that that was a missed opportunity to provide training on responding to what has been called multiple FSG calls, in other words, 3 or 4, particularly in light of the number of FSG calls received at Lacknell House, which in total was 5, although there were 2, I think, from one flat.
Yes, so I'm not sure of the detail, but I suspect this was accurately reflecting the events of the fire at Holcroft House and the number of calls they received. But yes, this would have been an ideal opportunity to have given emphasis and increased number of fire survival guidance calls.
Yes. Did anybody think at the time to do a comparison between the actual events of Lakanal, including the number of fire survival guidance calls there, and the actual events of this more recent incident, Holcroft House, and work out whether all of the aspects of the Holcroft House incident properly trained out the errors that had been made at Lakanal so far as they had been identified by the coroner?
I'm not sure what the content of the conversation by the development team was, no.
Don't know. Let's look at page 66. This is the 7th inject for crew managers and watch managers. And you can see it says exercise reference number 07, inject number CM/WM7. And there are some performance criteria that are set out there, some of which are decision-making model, dynamic risk assessment, various incident command policies, and item 8, 633, high-rise firefighting, and compartment firefighting, 793. And if you look at the text, it says, Holcroft House inject, and then in the main paragraph, having arrived at the incident, received a briefing, and taken over command, you are in conversation with the crew manager. When a man approaches you and tells you he is the council caretaker for the premises, he tells you that he believes the fire is on the 4th floor and that there is remedial work being undertaken on that floor and many others. He also tells you that he has had lots of issues with vandalism here and he suspects arson. And if we go to page 69, 3 pages on, you can see that the candidates are assessed there. That's an assessment grid for their performance and knowledge. And if you look at the 4th item down on the list, the 4th red bullet or square around the bullet, it says, consider partial or full evacuation of block. Do you know whose idea it was to insert that as an inject?
No, I've no idea.
Do you remember whether there was any discussion about the insertion of partial or full evacuation of block as an inject into this exercise?
No, I say I have no detailed knowledge of any of the injects or these aspects on this whole through the whole of this document.
No. Right. Looking at it, do you accept on its face there's nothing in this training, and tell me if I'm wrong about this from your wider knowledge, that there's nothing here about how a partial or full evacuation of the block would actually be achieved in practice?
No, I'm not sure what the visual inject and what they would have seen and therefore what conversations would be had, but on the face of what you read here, no.
Right, and presumably because this was based on the actual event, the actual incident, there had been a partial or full evacuation of Holcroft House. Is that right?
I believe there was a partial evacuation of the house, yes.
Right. Do you know how partial? In other words, how significant it was?
I wasn't at the incident. I've only become aware through reading some preparation for this, but I don't believe it was a significant part of the block that was evacuated.
Right. There's no training here on the rationale, is there? There's no training on why it is that a candidate ought to consider a full or partial evacuation as a result of being told by the caretaker that there was remedial work on the fire floor or elsewhere in the building.
So these sort of check boxes here aren't a training intervention. These are a response to what the candidate has said. So without seeing the detail of the package, I wouldn't be able to suggest. So that the package itself is designed to test the candidate's response and give injects. And this is marking whether or not they had discussed that option. And then the conversation would be if the candidate, for instance, was to say, I'm now considering a partial evacuation, then the assessor would say, what's making you consider that? And they would have a conversation about it. So it's not clear from here what that would lead to, because you'd have to see the training and have to actually see the training playing out. But this is an assessment to say whether or not they, I think and I believe that you means, I would say you unprompted, prompted or directed to actually have that. So I think that if a candidate didn't suggest that they might need to do one of these things, then it would require the trainer to prompt them to say, have you considered? And if they then didn't, the trainer might say, you now need to do A, B or C. That's what the boxes mean.
Right. Just help me with this. The presence of, the possibility of a trainee, crew manager or watch manager, either prompted or unprompted, saying there should be partial or full evacuation of the block as of this point, came from somewhere. Where did it come from? Do you know?
I would think it would have come as a result of the package being developed in response to the fire at Lacanau.
Right.
I don't know that. I'm making
You're making an assumption.
I am.
Can you help me with whether or not this training package was influenced in its development by, and thinking about the timing, the finalisation and publication of GRA 3.2 in February 2014?
I would only be guessing. I wouldn't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't. Sorry.
At all events, do you accept that the possibility of partial or full evacuation of this block in the circumstances of this fire was a feature or factor which was being tested one way or the other, appropriately or inappropriately?
Yes, from what I read here.
Yeah. Now, if we go to page 76, we can see that here is another inject, number 10 this time. And this is also for CMs and WMs, as opposed to either. And it says this: as incident commander, this is under the box, as incident commander you receive information from the bridgehead that the fire is actually on the 4th floor and has spread from building debris in the communal hallway to at least one flat on the 4th floor. In addition to a large quantity of debris left in the hallway, apparently by the renovation contractor, the flat is now 50% alight. Now, take it from me that there's nothing else, either before or after this inject, that refers to fire spread. Against the backdrop of the Lacanau House fire, and particularly its rapid external fire spread affecting a number of floors, do you know why that is?
No, I don't.
Do you accept that that was a failure by your department, at the very least, to train firefighters on the extent of the risk posed by weak or failed compartmentation?
I accept that the team that developed this should have used the exercise as a better opportunity to explore that, yes.
And does the same apply to rapid external fire spread and the risks it poses?
Yes, it does.
And the risks posed by external wall panels?
Yes, it does.
And in fact, would you agree that this training exercise, at least in those respects, does not in substance meet the Coroner's 7 incident command recommendations?
I wouldn't be comfortable to say that without seeing the training package, because I said I'm not familiar with the detail of it. We can only see the trainer notes here as opposed to the actual exercise itself. So I wouldn't be happy to confirm that as a detail, because I'm not familiar with the package. I'm sorry.
I should just tell you, we haven't had from the LFB any documents other than this training guide. So if there is any other material out there that you know about, then we would like to see that. But you can't, I think, identify it, can you?
No, I just said I think it would be easy if you could see, and I think it would be helpful to see the training package run with the trainer giving you those interventions to understand how that worked, because it wasn't something I saw in person, but I think that might give you a fuller understanding. I don't have that understanding, so I would be speculating about whether it did or didn't.
And can I assume that you've never seen, either at the time or in preparation to give evidence, the what you've called the training package run?
No, I haven't.
Mr. Reason accepted that Holcroft House, as presented to him, didn't convey what we'd intended in terms of fire spread, nor address the risks of external panelling or rapid fire spread, and accepted that that did not convey a response to the Rule 43. For our reference purposes, that's day 181, page 128, line 18 to 129, line 21. Do you agree with that?
If Gary Reason has seen the package and believes that to be the case, then I would trust his word. As I said, not being able to see the package, I would find it difficult to make that statement. But
I understand.
if Gary Reason has seen it and makes that statement, then yes, I would agree with him.
I understand. And we are proceeding on the assumption, of course, that the LFB has given full disclosure of all relevant documents and there's nothing there.
So yes, I'm a bit lost without being able to see it, is all I would say. But if Gary Reason agreed to that, then yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to turn to Babcock again and the incident course review process, which I referred to earlier this morning. So far, we've looked at documents which suggest that the coroner's seven incident command recommendations would also be fed into Babcock's initial course review of incident command training. And you'll recall we looked at TCAP 124, which said exactly that. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yes, and we don't need to go back to it. It's just for reference purposes, LFB 403716, page 8. Can we, from that basis, move to LFB 4343552? Now, this is a document that may be familiar to some and possibly to you. It is Babcock's initial programme course review report on incident management training, i.e. incident command training. As you can see from this document, this one is dated July 2013. But there is a covering email with this document I should show you at LFB 000073973. It's an email from Doug Massey to Phil Butler, which I think is what comes from Babcock to the LFB. Babcock's Incident Command Review 2013, Phil, PDF, glossy with photos, etc., Doug. Now, that's dated 27th of October 2014. That's the important point about the document. Peter Groves and Gary Reason confirmed in their evidence that there were various drafts of this document and some discussions about it between July 2013 and October 2014 when it was finalised. Thus far, do you agree with that or disagree with that, or don't you know?
Yes, I agree with that.
You agree. Now, go back to the document, LFB 000435552. Did you see this report during its drafting stage between 2013 or even before 2013 and October 2014?
I don't believe I saw the detail. I was aware that the work was in progress, but I don't believe I don't recall seeing any of the drafts. I may well have done. I saw the final document.
Do you know who at the LFB signed it off as acceptable?
That would have been someone in Peter Groves' team. They were the interface with Babcock's.
Well, just help me with that. Someone in Peter Groves' team, someone senior to him or at his level or junior to him?
Peter Groves ultimately, yes, would be the sign-off because he was the
Right.
training manager for London Fire Brigade.
Right. Did anybody more senior to Peter Groves approve it before he signed it off or authorise him to sign it off?
I don't know. That would have either been James Douglas or Gary Reason.
Right. Not you, I take it.
No, I wasn't in the training world at that time. That wasn't part of my department. So the course reviews were all conducted by the training interface department that Peter Groves ran under James Douglas.
Do you remember when you first saw the final version? I've given you the date range, July 13 to October 14.
No, sorry, I don't recall back then.
Now, let's look inside the report itself. We find two, perhaps I should say only two, references to Lacknell House. The first is at page 12. Can we go to that? And that is under the heading Research Findings 6.1 Historical Context. You see at the top of the screen. And then 2/3 of the way down the screen, you can see that there is some history. Do you see it says, since 1991, there have been other notable events which have further influenced incident management training, including Bethnal Green, July 2004, Harrow Court, February 2005, Atherstone-on-Stour, November 2007, Lacknell House, July 2009, Shirley Towers, 2010. And all of those are firefighter fatalities except Lacknell.
Yes.
But that's the reference there. And the second reference we see to Lacanal is in the appendix, which starts at page 30. And you can see it there on your screen. Appendix, Stage 1 Incident Management Review Output Document. And then if you go on in that appendix, please, to page 32, you can see a row headed Political Considerations, you see, and it says corporate responsibility for managing the health and safety of employees whilst at work is a statutory requirement. Failure to meet and maintain these statutory obligations exposes the fire authority to the risk of legal action. And then if you turn the page, I'm sorry, foot of page 32, I need a little bit more there. Firefighting is a risk-critical activity, and shortcomings in incident management will not only result in service delivery failure, but may lead to injury and or death with legal repercussions for the individuals responsible and the fire authority. Effective incident management training and assessment is fundamental to successfully delivering the service, managing risk, and ensuring the safety of fire service personnel and the community. It provides the evidence to support an individual's competence to undertake the role. And then we see this. Current issues for consideration. First bullet, the outcome of the Lacanal House inquest and Rule 43 letter to the LFB. Now, that's it. There are those two references to Lacanal House in this document. Beyond what I've shown you, do you agree that there's nothing in this report, taking it from me that there isn't, as at October 2014, to indicate that the coroner's 7 incident command recommendations have been substantially incorporated into or considered by the incident command course review being conducted by Babcock?
I'm not familiar with the page-by-page detail, but if you say it's not there, then yes, I agree.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I'm really asking you just to cast your mind back and recall whether what I've just put to you is something that struck you at the time. But other than those 2 references to Lacanal, there's nothing in the report to tell the reader that the 7 incident command recommendations made by the coroner had been substantially incorporated into the brigade's training.
I don't recall whether I had a conversation or whether I considered that at the time.
Right. Now, Mr. Groves accepted, Peter Groves accepted in his evidence, day 177, page 82, line 8 to 18, that the absence of any element or process for, as it were, standing back and assessing what might be missing from this document was, in his words, a marked deficiency in the effectiveness of the review programme. Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Now, given the prominence of the Incident Command Course Review as the process by which each of the coroner's 7 incident command recommendations would be addressed by the LFB, are you able to explain why there's no mention of those either collectively or individually anywhere in this report?
No, so I wasn't part of the authoring of this report. I'm not sure what the parameters for the content of the report were, so no, I can't help with that, I'm sorry.
Does it, and you may not be able to help with the answer to this either, but as a matter of logic, would you accept that if the coroner had picked up this report in October 2014 and read it, she would not be able to find anywhere where she was assured that her 7 recommendations had been identified and addressed, and the reasons why the brigade was satisfied that the incident command learning from Lacanal had been embedded into incident command policy?
If you say there is no reference to that, then yes, I would agree.
And policy, process, training, and the like.
I would agree.
So what do we look at in order to test whether what you and Gary Reason told the ODCB, that the incident command recommendations would be incorporated into the Babcock IC course review, what do we look at to test whether that actually happened?
I think that I'm speculating. I don't know the rest of the documents, the rest of the content around them from that time. I'm sorry, my memory doesn't serve that well far back. But I think the main aspect would have been what was translated into the TCAP as that. I didn't see the previous iterations or the covering document that would have come with this and the covering report, and whether or not that made reference to it. So that without being able to see those, it's quite difficult to. It would merely be me speculating on where you'd look for that.
as I started with this line of questioning, you'll recall that the TCAP itself recorded the fact that recommendations would be made for further enhancements fed into the Incident Command course review. And we also saw the updates that you provided to the ODCB, as well as Gary Reason's monitoring reports, marking these as complete, which also referred to the Incident Command course review. My question really is, did you ever take any steps yourself to look for a document that assured you that the coroner's 7 Incident Command recommendations had been fed into Babcock's Incident Command course review and had been done so with a satisfactory outcome?
So that document would have been the Rule 43 Action Plan update, where the updates were provided by both Babcock's, the training team, Peter Groves' team, and the team that were developing the TCAP. So that's where all of our assurance was taking place around the Lakanal House recommendations.
So the answer is that there wasn't anything, I think, is what you're telling me, other than the TCAP, which is the document that shows what the training was that was being developed, and the exercises themselves.
And the Rule 43 Update Action Plan, which was where the updates were provided.
Yes, but the updates are provided to the ODCB. What is the objective material on which somebody coming in from outside could look at and say to themselves, I am satisfied that what the ODCB was told about Incident Command recommendations being fed into the Incident Command course review by Babcock has been satisfactorily completed?
I'm not sure there was a document that would have drawn those lines between those two.
Wasn't that the kind of thing that was supposed to be at the heart of operational assurance?
I think that was something that was part of the difficulties about having an outsourced training contract and the difficulties of getting an outsourced training provider to do work and to get to understand the complexities of London Fire Brigade. I think that responsibility sat with a number of departments. The Operational Assurances Department was predominantly, as we talked about yesterday, around the assurances of the performance of operational crews on the fire grounds. We had very limited resources and therefore would not have had the ability to have somebody completely embedded in the training team assuring all of the work that was being undertaken by Babcock's. That would have been an ideal world. Unfortunately, the number of people that we had working in training was considerably reduced when the contract was outsourced. That was part of the reason for outsourcing the contract, was to reduce London Fire Brigade's training team.
Just the last part of that answer, I just want to examine in a little bit more detail. You say that you wouldn't have had the ability to have somebody completely embedded in the training team assuring that all of the work being undertaken by Babcock's, that would have been an ideal world. Now, one can understand that if one is talking about the entirety of the brigade's training needs. Why does that apply to the very special incident command training that the coroner had recommended in the light of the Lakanal House inquests?
Because there were two members of the operational assurance team that gave a considerable amount of time in the development of the 2 TCAPs in response. So there was a considerable amount of operational assurance and at Graham Ellis as well, time taken to developing and working alongside the team that Peter Groves had and Babcock's in the development of the training in response to those recommendations.
Yes, but why not then put a full stop at the end of it and say, we've decided that some of this at least should be fed into the Incident Command course review, which was a much longer process. It was anticipated to be 3 years. And at the end say, because this is Lakanal, because it was inquest, because it was special, we are going to have somebody senior in the OA department make sure that what was promised to ADCB actually came about. Why did that not happen?
I think that my concern with that would be, and this is my view on it now, that if we were purely to rely on those recommendations being embedded as part of the Incident Command course review, as you've just rightly said, that was a very long process. And I think that, you know, to my mind, definitely, and Graham Ellis's, we wanted this work to carry on at far more pace than to wait for the rollout of the Incident Command review, which would have been 3 years as a process and then further development of a training package. So I'm not sure that the incident command review was the answer to it, because I think that was a very long and wieldy process.
But it was surely a partial answer to it, because that is what the ODCB was told, and indeed the strategy committee.
I think it was a partial answer that it was taking part in that, but the main answer was to get on with the work and the matter in hand through the TCAPs.
Let's go then to the November 2013 Lacknell House Working Group Monitoring Report. This one's November 2013. We saw yesterday, LFB 000067832. And if we go to page 25 there, please, you can see what we looked at yesterday, marked as blue, and we went through that. What I want to show you is the final paragraph in the right-hand column at the very bottom of the page, which says, as an ongoing quality assurance initiative, the issues detailed in this recommendation now form a standing agenda item at the quarterly Incident Command Forum meetings held between the Brigade and Babcock. These meetings are used to explore opportunities to further embed these incident command-related issues into other parts of the training portfolio, such as command assessments. And then it goes on, as an additional safeguard, with the requirements of being further monitored at the weekly LFB Babcock Incident Management Liaison meetings, which reviews the issues and themes arising from operational incidents attended. What were the weekly LFB/Babcock Incident Management Liaison meetings that are referred to in that last paragraph there?
I don't specifically recall. They weren't a meeting I attended, but from looking at that, I would imagine they were a weekly update meeting between the LFB, potentially someone I would suggest from Peter Groves' team as the link with Babcock's, which would look and review the issues, and whether someone attended from my team, I can't recall without seeing either an invite or the minutes of a meeting.
Right. Would you know whether they were minuted?
I have no idea, I'm sorry.
We have not seen any minutes for those meetings.
I wasn't aware specifically of those meetings.
Right. You weren't aware of them at all?
Specifically, I wasn't aware. I knew that there were meetings taking place. I don't recall those specifically.
I mean, you saw this document at the time?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So you would have known that there was a reference to these meetings?
Yes, I'm just saying I wasn't aware of the detail and who was sitting on those meetings.
No. Did you ask Peter Groves, Graham Ellis, what are these meetings? Are they minuted? Can I see a minute?
No, I didn't.
Why is that?
Because Graham Ellis was keeping me updated whether there were any problems or issues, and therefore I didn't feel the need to press further whether or not these meetings were minuted. I'm not sure, as they were weekly meetings, whether they were. I know the Incident Command Forum meetings were minuted, because in preparation for this I've seen details of those.
Right. Well, we've got no evidence, by which I mean we have no documents, which we've seen from the Brigade, to show that these weekly liaison meetings, as they were described, ever considered the Coroner's 7 Incident Command recommendations, or ensured that they were somehow reflected in the training. We've seen nothing of that nature. Are you able, as you sit there, to tell us how those meetings resulted, if at all, in the Coroner's recommendations being reflected in Incident Command training?
I'm sorry, I wasn't a member of either of those meeting groups, so no, I can't help you with that.
So you can't explain to us whether or not that process did provide an additional safeguard, the words used there?
No, I'm sorry, I can't. I think those were Gary Reason's words. Whether he had further information on that, I'm not sure.
Right. But this document went through your hands, but you didn't ask the questions I've just asked you?
No, I didn't.
Why is that?
I don't know, because Gary Reason, I suspect, was fully up to date as he was presenting the information to the Lacknell House Working Group, and he hadn't asked me the question, so I assume that I felt he was comfortable with the information he was providing.
Right. What was the purpose of these documents going through your hands then, if you were just going to hand them on the assumption that everything in them was accurate?
I don't think the words going through the hands. My team were the ones, as I explained yesterday, who collated all of the updates, and these documents were then used as the discussion point for ODCB to discuss what was in those documents, and I suspect we may well have had detailed conversations, and we did have detailed conversations around all of it at ODCB, so it wasn't just a case of supplying information and passing it on. They were used as the conversation to discuss progress and to be subjected to questions from the Deputy Commissioner and from the directors.
Can we go back to the bottom of page 25, please? You can see that there's a reference in that last paragraph that I read to you to something called the Quarterly Incident Command Forum meetings. What were those?
I believe those were a meeting that, from reading papers in preparation for this, I don't recall the setting up, that I think either Gary Reason or James Dalgleish asked to be established, and I believe that DAC Graham Ellis chaired those meetings, and there were meetings between London Fire Brigade and Babcock. I didn't attend these meetings.
You didn't?
No, I wasn't a member of those meetings.
Can we go, please, to LFB 000085404? This is a report, the title of which is Re-establishing an Incident Command Training Forum, dated 25th January 2013, for the meeting of the Operational Directorates Coordination Board, the ODCB, and the report is authored by James Dalgleish, Head of HRD, as you can see. The reference there to ODCB, of course, is the body we've referred to before, and as ACOA at the time, you would have been a member of that.
I was, yes.
Now let's look at the summary. When the LFB had an internal training department, the AC Training established an Incident Command Training Forum, ICTF. The purpose of the forum was to seek continual improvement in training and development of all officers who undertake incident command as part of their role. Since 1st of April, when the Babcock International Group, Babcock, formally became the London Fire Brigade's training provider, and the training department was disestablished, this forum ceased to exist. This paper proposes the creation of a new Incident Command Forum. And just pausing there for clarity, the 1st of April there is a reference to 1st of April 2012, isn't it?
Yes, it
It's
is.
the previous year. Whose idea was it to re-establish the Incident Command Training Forum?
It looks like it was James Dalgleish's.
And if you look at the recommendation immediately below the summary, it says that ODCB note the content of this paper and approve the re-establishment of an Incident Command Training Forum chaired by Operational Assurance. Is it right that that recommendation was accepted by ODCB?
Yes, I believe so. The forum was established, so yes, I would say it was accepted.
Yes, I mean, I can show you the meeting. Let's just look at that. LFB 000040675. Let's just have page 1 up. There's the ODCB meeting of the 25th of January 2013, the same date as the report we've just seen, and you can see that you are present as one of the list of people there, yes?
Yes.
And if we go, please, to page 3, section 5, paragraph 5.3, a third of the way down the page. This is about the Incident Command Forum, as you can see from the top of the page at 5.1. Subject to the above, the proposals were agreed, as it says in 5.3, yes?
Yes.
And then the action, I can't quite read that. Is it II? Or is it H? H/HR and D.
I think it should say...
I'm told it's H.
Yes, I think it should say H. It looks like
HRD to progress the re-establishment of an Incident Command Training Forum. So we can see that that decision was made at a meeting at which you were present.
Yes, that's correct.
Now let's look, please, back at the report, LFB 000085404. Mr. Chairman, before I do that, I'm noting the time,
Yes.
and there's a bit of work to be done on this document. It's probably appropriate to take the
That would be
break
better.
now, having
Yes,
whetted your
all right.
appetite for what is to come.
Well, it sounds though it would be a good point to take the break. So, Ms. Cotton, we'll stop there. We'll resume, please, at 11:30. And as before, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence when you're out of the room.
No, sir, thank you.
Right, good. Thank you very much. Half past 11, give you enough time for whatever has to be done?
Yes, yes,
Half past 11 then, please.
certainly.
Would you ask Cotton to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Ms. Cotton, are you
sir.
ready to carry on?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Williams.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can we please go back to LFB 3085404, the report of the 25th of January 2013 to the ODCB, re-establishing an incident command training forum. Can we go to page 4 in that document, section 5, the forum's terms of reference? And you can see there that it was proposed that the ICF is chaired and managed by the OA department. That was your department, yes?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Because, and there are 2 bullet points about why. First, the OA department has agreed reporting protocols with ODCB in respect of incident command performance, and this forum would be established to support and inform these, not report independently. Second bullet, this forum would enable Babcock to understand the issues and challenges of incident command in London and give them guidance on how best to respond to the LFB's needs. This paper recognises that the lead on incident command in the Brigade is the incident management policy team within the OA department, and that this team should lead this work. And then it goes on to the terms of reference themselves, and there are 6 of those, and you can see those if we scroll down to the bottom of page 4 on the screen there. And I'm not going to read them all out to you. You can see those, but particularly picking up item 1 and 2, acting on direction given by ODCB on incident command training issues and contribute to performance evidence collated through DIOT, and the second, act as conduit through which the LFB can enable Babcock to understand the issues and challenges of incident command in London and provide a focused sounding board for the development of training in this competence area. And then you can see other things as well, governing body for incident command elements of promotion and for management of the incident command exercise panel, as well as other things. Now, section 6 then goes on, membership of the forum. If this paper is agreed, it is proposed that the following heads of service would be requested to nominate a representative. Operational Assurance, Chair, see that?
Yes.
And then over the page, on page 5, other members. And you have operations, prevention and performance, operations, prevention and response, operational procedures, operational resilience, strategy planning and performance. And then under 7, frequency of forum meetings, it is proposed that the forum meet every 2 months at Union Street. The frequency of this meeting would facilitate the forum feeding into both Operational Assurance's 6 monthly report to ODCB and inform consideration of the need for any interim reporting of contemporary issues. Now, that's the document. The inquiry asked for minutes of the Incident Command Forum meetings, and the LFB recently disclosed 5 sets of minutes spanning the period June 2013 to April 2014. From a review of those minutes, we have not noted you as having attended any of those meetings, but instead Graham Ellis or Neil Withers attended from Operational Assurance. Why was that?
I think, as it says in this document here, that all the heads of departments were to nominate somebody to represent them, and Graham Ellis was chosen as the chair due to his extensive operational experience and the fact that he was the day-to-day manager and lead for the incident management team.
Right. Did you receive and read the minutes of these meetings, the meetings of this forum?
I don't believe I did, but I don't recall, but I remember having conversations on my one-to-one meetings with Graham Ellis about this forum.
You don't? You don't recall? Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand your answer. I think do you recall having conversations in your one-to-one meetings with Graham Ellis about this forum?
Yes, I recall conversations, but I don't recall specifically seeing the minutes of the meeting.
I follow. Did you ever ask for them?
I don't recall, I'm sorry.
Let's go back to the November 2013 Lakanal House Working Group Monitoring Report, LFB 000067832. We saw this just earlier this morning before the break, and if you note there on page 25, at the very foot of the page on the right-hand side, I read to you that the paragraph says, as an ongoing quality assurance initiative, the issues detailed in this recommendation now form a standing agenda item at the quarterly Incident Command Forum meetings held between Brigade and Babcock. It isn't clear to us, looking at the agendas, which agenda item that is. And let's see if you can help us with that, Ms. Cotton. Can we go, please, to LFB 00123-662? This is the agenda for the meeting of the 19th of December 2013. Open meeting, apologies from Neil Withers. And if you cast your eye down, we're not clear what item in this agenda should cover the 7 Incident Command recommendations. Can you help us with that?
From reading the agenda, then I would only be able to speculate that it could either have been covered in potentially in section 5 under the review and the TCAPs, but I'm not aware, so I didn't attend these meetings, so I'm not sure at which point, but I know it was the subject of the conversation at these meetings.
Right. You're speculating it might be 5, but is the reason why you say it might be 5 is the same reason I might say that it was 5, namely we can read what 5 says?
Indeed, yes. I just know it was talked about from my meetings with Graham Ellis. I'm not sure under which agenda item they specifically addressed it.
Right. Now, let's look at LFB 00123-660. This is the meeting, or the minutes for the meeting of the 5th of September 2013. And again, you were not present. We see that Graham Ellis was in the chair for the meeting. Did he usually run them, do you think?
Yes, Graham Ellis was the nominated chair for the meeting.
If we look at page 2, under the heading Rule 43s, at the top of the screen, top of the page, it says GE, Graham Ellis, informed the group that around the country a number of Rule 43s have been issued. DM explained that he is currently, that's Doug Massey, he is currently carrying out work on the LFB Lacknell House Rule 43 to ensure it is incorporated into all aspects of Babcock Incident Command training. Now, given our review of the recently disclosed minutes of this forum, this is the only mention that we've been able to identify where the Rule 43 recommendations are referred to. Can you help? Are we right about that? Or do you not know?
I don't know. I can only see what from the meeting that's in front of me. I'm sorry, I don't know the detail.
Assuming, as we must from the LFB's disclosure, that the only mention of the Lacknell Rule 43 recommendations in the proceedings of the Incident Command Training Forum is here, do you accept that the Incident Command Training Forum, sitting within your department as it did not consider the Incident Command Rule 43 recommendations on a regular basis, quotes, as an ongoing quality assurance initiative, close quotes?
I'm sorry, I'm unable to answer that because I am not aware of the content of the conversation during the meeting, and minutes of meetings aren't always accurately recorded. So because I wasn't present, I would have to speak to a colleague to find out. But I'm not sure. I can see it's, if you say this is the only recorded one, but I couldn't comment on the detail of those meetings.
Right. So you had informal discussions with Graham Ellis at your one-to-one weeklies about this. Did you ever ask him about the standing agenda item, about whether he was satisfied that the regular consideration of incident command at this forum was acting as a continuing quality assurance initiative, as the ODCB had been told?
I'm not sure I would have put it in those words, but I know that in my regular one-to-one meetings with Graham Ellis, we regularly had a conversation about the updates regarding the progress of the recommendations, and the conversations were being had at the Incident Command Forum.
Right. Now, making all allowances for the absence of the minutes and for the way in which the minutes were drafted, looking at the documentation we've got, do you accept that despite the ODCB and the Lacknell House Working Group being told that the Incident Command Training Forum was looking by way of quality assurance on a continuing basis at the Coroner's 7 items for incident command, that wasn't in fact the case.
As I said before, I'm unable to make that assumption because I'm not sure what conversations were had during the meeting.
Let's then turn to the development and release of the new incident command courses in 2016 and 2017. Let's go back to Babcock's October 2014 Incident Command Course Review Report that we saw earlier, please, at LFB 000-43552. That's the first page, just to remind you of the document dated July 2013, but we know finalised in October 2014. Page 26 in that document, please. First paragraph, under the heading Recommendations, section 14. And the first paragraph there says this: "It is a conclusion of the review that whilst there is some scope to improve incident management training in the short term, there is a greater need to adopt a more systematic and fundamental approach involving both the LFB and Babcock to maximise the benefits longer term." And if we then skip the next paragraph, we look at paragraph 14.1, key recommendation. And it says this: "It is recommended that a joint LFB/Babcock group be established to undertake a systematic and fundamental overhaul of incident management training." And then the report goes on to set out the recommended remit of that group, the joint group. Peter Groves told us that the group was set up was the Incident Command Project Board, also known as the Incident Command Programme Board. Were you a member of that board?
I believe I was, yes.
Right. Was the, let's call it the ICPB, because let's not let the habit of a lifetime go by, was it previously known as the Course Review Board?
I think this was a separate entity, but I think the Course Review Board, as I recall, looked at courses across the whole of the training department. This was specific to incident management, so I believe they were two separate entities.
Two separate entities. Was there any commonality of membership between the two?
Inevitably there would have been. I can't recall the specific detail of the membership of each group, I'm sorry.
Now, Gary Reason told us that he chaired the Course Review Board, which I think you've just told us is different from the Incident Command Programme Board or Project Board, ICPB. Did you come to chair the Course Review Board at any time?
I don't believe I did. I believe that would have fallen to Peter Groves, as that was the work of his department.
I see. Now, it's a different group, this, the Incident Command Project or Programme Board. You were a member of it, as you told us. Who chaired it?
I can't recall. Do you have a copy of the minutes? I think that would help us.
We might. We have some, and I will show you those in a moment. But before we do, let's see if we can get to the bottom of what I want to ask you about. Peter Groves told us that this board, the IC Project or Programme Board, met monthly.
I think so. If you say so, to the best of my recollection, right. Yes.
Let's go to your second statement, please. LFB 00118213, page 10, paragraph 50. And if we go to paragraph 50, in the last three lines there, you say, "I would expect the LFB's Incident Command Project Board, ICPB, to review the LFB's Incident Command Training Programme to manage the project of commissioning training along with ORT." And then at 51 you say, "I receive regular updates regarding the implementation of revalidation at ICPB and CMB meetings. The ICPB was the governing board for the review of incident command training. However, any formal changes to LFB policies or training had to be approved by the CMB. I would also speak with Peter Groves and AC Ellis individually at monthly meetings as they reported directly to me. I've set out my recollection of these meetings from paragraph 55 below." Now, the first set of minutes of the ICPB, which is, I think, what you were after, we find at LFB 00122989. I'm not sure I can give you all of them, but let's look at the first one. This is a set of minutes for the meeting of the 23rd of June, 2015, as you see. Note the year, 2015. And we can see that you are listed as the second person down in the list as present. Assistant Commissioner Operational Assurance. Yes?
This is the course review board, yes, not the ICPB.
Ah, this is the Course Review Board.
Yes.
They're not the Incident Command Project Board.
No.
Right. Just looking at this document, then, would it be right to say that these meetings concerned the development of the LFB's new Incident Command courses?
I'm sorry, I would have to see the detail of the meeting to recall that. I can't remember. I think the course review board covered a wide range of courses, so I would need to see further detail. Sorry.
Right. Let's look and see page 2, just to see if this helps you. Page 2, BA and real fire training. And then at the very foot of page 2, incident command. You see?
Oh, yes.
CK detailed that the incident command review had been through a process, as previously reported, to determine options for a proposed solution for the initial acquisition and maintenance training programs for Level 1 Incident Command. This process had been replicated for Levels 2, 3 and 4 solutions, which are currently being developed. Then if we turn the page to page 3, the options relating to length of course duration and indicative TUs have been submitted to Project Board and are tabled for further discussion at the Project Board meeting scheduled for the 15th of July 2015. And then there's something about costs. PG asked that Jackie also be invited to the IC Project Board meetings to advise on commercial matters. It looks as if the IC Project Board was the same as this or different from this. Could you help us with how they related?
So I think the course review board, looking at the detail of this, I saw a brief mention of BA training and management development. So I think the course review board was the overarching board that looked at all of the courses, training courses provided by Babcock's. And when I look at the membership, there were people from strategy and development and fire safety. So that would indicate it was a wide-reaching membership. Looking from what I see here, the Incident Command Project Board appears to be a subsidiary or a side meeting of that to specifically discuss incident command.
Right. You say specifically discuss incident command. Wasn't it all about incident command?
The Incident Command Project Board, yes. The Course Review Board, no.
Right. Now, the Course Review Board is different from the Incident... Is this right? The Incident Command Course Review.
So the Incident Command Project Board, I'm sorry, London Fire Brigade does like an acronym. The ICPB is a board specifically to look at incident command.
Yeah.
But the Course Review Board would make reference to that because they were discussing all courses. I
follow. So this meeting is a generic and overall meeting looking at the course review. Was that a standing board?
Yes, it was.
When was it first established?
I'm not sure, but I imagine on the inception of Babcock taking over as the outsourced training provider.
And when did you first join it? When you became ACOA?
I would imagine so, but I can't confirm that without seeing the minutes. I would assume so.
Right. It's right to think that the Incident Command Course Review covered all levels of Incident Command, levels 1 to 4, eventually.
Yes, it did.
And we heard from Peter Groves that the Level 1 Incident Command courses were rolled out sometime between 2016 and 17, and that would fit with the TCAP 0124 we saw earlier, wouldn't it?
So the TCAP 0124 was specific to the Lacanal recommendations,
yes.
But the course review for Level 1 was a much wider reaching programme.
Do you remember that the Level 1 Incident Command courses were rolled out between 2016 and 2017?
I believe so. I don't specifically remember the date, but that seems to accord.
And it's right to think that the new Incident Command courses, which, as I've just shown you from this document, for levels 2, 3 and 4 incident commanders had not been rolled out before the Grenfell Tower fire in June 2017.
I believe that some of them had been. I think level 3 and 4 were definitely the ones that were areas of concern, but I believe that level 2 had started to be rolled out, but I can't confirm that. I would need to see further documentation. I know there'd been a lot of work around levels 1 and 2, but there were significant difficulties being identified in levels 3 and 4.
Right. Let's just see if we can pin this to a document, given that you're not entirely sure. If we go, please, to LFB 00118195, what I'm showing you is the minute of the Incident Command Project Board meeting, so this is the ICPB, on the 22nd of August 2017, after the Grenfell Tower fire, 2 months or so afterwards. You're not present, but note the date. You see that?
I do, yes.
But if you go to page 2, please, let's look at item 4. You can see status updates Babcock. Level 1 is covered there. Level 2, development, maintenance and group manager. DM advised that the second GM pilot is due to go ahead 11th and 12th September. This is 2017. SM advised that JS and PF have confirmed that they will observe the course, as well as Mark Reed, who will be reviewing for the strategic arrangement workshop. SM to arrange a subsequent post-pilot meeting for the Level 2 GM course. Level 3, now that the stakeholders have been confirmed, a meeting will be booked from the second week of September to scope the requirements for the Level 3 and 4 course. DS confirmed that Babcock stakeholders will be CK or DS, Doug Massey or Mark Gurney. Level 4, development, maintenance as above. It looks from that as if Level 1 was in place, Level 2 and 3, or Level 2 was only in the pilot phase, and Levels 3 and 4 were still being scoped.
Yes.
As of September 2017.
Yes.
Yes. Now, June 2017, the month of the Grenfell Tower fire, was just short of 3 years, wasn't it, after the LFB received Babcock's finalised course review report in October 2014.
Yes, it was.
And over 4 years after the Lakanal House Coroner's Incident Command recommendations in March 2013.
Yes, it was.
Do you accept that that time frame for the development and rollout of new Incident Command training, which mostly occurred on your watch as ACOA and Director of Safety and Assurance, was extremely slow?
I agree it was worse than slow, it was sluggish. My role as AC Operational Assurance, I had limited impact on that. I would regularly report to Gary Reason and James Dalgleish about my frustrations and my serious concerns about the lack of progress that was being made. Graham Ellis and I had regular conversations. We met, Graham Ellis and I, with members of the Babcock training team to try and give them assistance. So we met with Doug Massey to try and give them assistance to progress this because we were so frustrated with the lack of progress. And when I became the Director of Safety and Assurance in 2016, I again, through my meetings with Peter Groves as the conduit with training, expressed my serious concern about the lack of progress. This was one of my greatest frustrations and angers, the lack of ability of Babcocks to be able to develop this training, and it was a subject of a regular conversation at several different boards because it was unacceptable how long it took.
It sounds as if your frustration and anger was directed at Babcock. Is that what I take from what you've just told us?
Yes, Babcocks were the training provider who was supposed to be developing the training. We were providing them with subject matter experts over and above the requirements of the contract on a regular basis. In fact, members of my team and other teams, especially the operational policy team, were spending an inordinate amount of time working alongside Babcocks to assist to develop this training and other training, and it was still taking ridiculously long time to do.
But Babcocks were responsible for delivery, but the content was the LFB's responsibility, wasn't it?
No, the content and the development of the packages were all Babcock's responsibility. We were merely tasked to provide subject matter experts to assist them. The development of the package was entirely the responsibility of Babcock as the training provider.
We had understood from Mr. Groves' evidence that it was the commissioning department that was to approve and give final authorisation to the course contents. Is that not right?
They were working alongside it and approving it, but not developing it under any circumstance. We had got rid of all the teams that developed our training as a result of the outsourced training contract because the specifics of the contract were that Babcocks were to develop the training, and in fact part of their bid for the training was they were going to provide us with innovative new ways of developing and providing training. And I saw very limited opportunities where they did that.
Did anybody, to your knowledge, yourself included, within the brigade, ever ask themselves whether, instead of simply blaming Babcock for the sluggish progress, there was something that they could do, you could do, to take back control, as it were, of the course content and delivery in order to speed things up?
Unfortunately, yes, this was a conversation we had, but as we had signed up to a very long-term contract with very specific details with an outsourced training provider, it was something that wasn't possible to do because it was within the remits of that training contract. It was a conversation that I had with Gary Reason and James Dalgleish, and I know it was a conversation that was discussed at Commissioners' Board. But unfortunately, at that point, due to the requirements to outsource our training, we had got rid of all of the teams that did the development of that training as part of the contract.
Did anybody actually go back and work out why it was that LFB had ended up in a position whereby their outsourcing arrangements had so tied their hands that they could not speedily address the Lacknell House coroner's recommendations in respect of incident command?
I'm sorry, I think that's a question you would have to direct to the then Commissioner Ron Dobson.
Well, that's a very helpful pointer, but I'm asking you, can you help us?
I would imagine they would have done, but you would have to ask Ron Dobson if they consider that.
Right. Well, Ron Dobson, was Ron Dobson kept fully abreast of the delays and the problems with developing level 2, level 3 and level 4 training and the speed with which even level 1 was rolled out? Was he kept fully informed of all those things?
I would have imagined so. I kept both Gary Reason and James Dalgleish as my line managers fully informed, so I would imagine through that process they would then have informed the Commissioner.
Can you recall any specific occasion on which you had a conversation with Gary Reason about what he was telling the CMB, or the CMT for that matter, about the worse than slow, in your words, sluggish development of the incident command training programmes?
No, I recall talking to him on several occasions about it. I don't know what the subject of the conversations he had at Commissioners' Board were.
Did he, from what you could tell, did he share your anger and frustration about the speed of progress?
He did.
And did you ever have a discussion with him about what he was going to tell Ron Dobson and bring it home to him about how you might be able to improve matters?
No, I wouldn't presume to tell my line manager what he was going to tell the Commissioner.
Now, we've also seen, I think, from documents, and Peter Graves confirmed this, that the incident command review had only been partially completed and was continuing at the time of the fire. And we see that, in a sense, from this document. We've not seen any evidence that would indicate to us, the inquiry, that as between the coroner's recommendations in March 2013 and the date of the Grenfell Tower on the 14th of June 2017, that the Rule 43 actions were in any way incorporated into or reflected in any new incident command courses. Can you help? So
they were definitely incorporated into the TCAPs for 0153 and 0124, which were the new training interventions directly as a result. As to the detail of what was put into the new general incident command training courses, I'm not sure of that level of detail.
Right. In fact, but in general, do you accept that LFB's post-Lacknell incident command training failed to ensure that the incident commanders received full and proper training on all known operational risks, including rapid external fire spread and failed compartmentation?
No, I think I couldn't agree to that statement saying they'd failed to provide all training, because there were a number of different training interventions, not only through Babcock's but through the training that took place regularly on fire stations, through the actual practical exercises that took place in high-rise blocks. So there were a number of different training interventions that were taking place on a regular basis throughout London Fire Brigade.
Well, we've seen two of those. We've seen the Lacknell House training package, and we've seen Holcroft House. I thought you'd agreed with me that there was nothing in there, at least, about rapid external fire spread and failed compartmentation.
In those two specifics, yes. What I'm saying is that we don't have the detail of the vast range of operational training that was taking place alongside that, as a regular basis on fire stations, as large-scale operational exercises, as multi-agency exercises. So without being able to see the detail of all of those vast numbers of training interventions, I couldn't agree with that.
I see. So when you said you couldn't agree with it, was that because you didn't know one way or the other?
No, it's because I believe there were a large number of training interventions that would have covered some of those issues, but I don't have the detail of those to be able to make that comment.
Right. Forgive me. What is the basis on which you hold the belief that, notwithstanding the absence from the Babcock training, nonetheless station-based staff were receiving training in how to handle rapid external fire spread and failed compartmentation?
So on those two specific issues, there would have been a number of opportunities, especially with the compartmentation. The rapid external fire spread less so, but on the wider training issues around all of those recommendations following the Lacanau fire, then there would have been a number of opportunities throughout training interventions that took place right across London Fire Brigade to address those issues.
Yes, opportunities, yes. Were they taken, to your knowledge?
Yes, absolutely, through the large-scale training exercises that I just talked about. So there were regular 6, 8, 10, 12 pump exercises that took place where operational crews would actually run through scenarios for real in a training environment, obviously without setting fires, but and also station-based training events. So that would require you to be able to access all of the individual training records and the local station and borough training plans to see the detail of that.
Let's go to LFB 45960, please. This is a CFOA LGA joint document, London Fire Brigade Fire Peer Challenge Report, March-April 2015. Do you remember this document?
I wouldn't have been party to seeing the final document. That would have been a CMB related document. I remember the peer challenge taking place.
You do. Let's go to page 12, please, paragraph 37. The authors say this: in general, there is a culture of seeking the best solution to issues rather than the most utilitarian. Despite this intention, this sometimes manifests itself in some clunky complex processes, sheep-dip training, and non-tailored renewal of competencies and training. Looking at the evidence we've seen so far together about incident command, do you agree that that was what was happening with the LFB's new incident command courses? A desire to incorporate everything, but ultimately resulting in delay?
I would agree that it's resulting in delay. I can't see the context of what they're referring to in this paragraph. It would be very difficult to understand. I think this is talking about the whole range of training interventions. But I would say that, yes, London Fire Brigade did have a culture of seeking the very best solutions, and that did sometimes take a very long time.
Let's see what Gary Reason told the inquiry, please. See if you agree with what he said. Day 181, page 79. And let's look together at lines 1 to 16. He says, it's really, really important, and it probably accounts for some of the lag in the delivery. You really need to be careful that you're not giving one constituent within your organisation one bit of training that is inconsistent with another constituent that's going to come along 6 months later and do a different type of training, but related to the same subject. That is now, they're out of step. That is an absolute no-no. You get yourself into real problems with that. So I know there's been a lot of talk about the clumsiness of this sort of process, but partly it's to avoid that inconsistency and the potential confusion that you cause by having one group being trained slightly differently to another group, but actually they're all going to end up at the same incident, and that is a recipe for disaster. Do you agree with that?
I don't know what context that's in. I'm sorry, that's a wide-ranging statement, but I don't know what specific question you'd ask to get that. Would it be possible to see the question?
Yes, of course. Let's go back to page 78, please, and look at the question I asked him at line 2. I should just tell you, Gary Reason gave us quite a lot of information, often in one go. and therefore what I've just read to you was some way down in his answer. But the question he was addressing was this. One of the reasons from what you have just said in your long but nonetheless rich answer is that there are lots of things that the LFB was trying to do. Looking back on it, might it have been just simpler to focus very tightly on incident command training courses in each of the 7 areas rather than trying to link that into things like incident command training courses or assessment for promotion? That was the context. Having shown you the context, are you prepared to agree with what he said in the passage I've read to you, forming part of the answer to that question?
I don't understand how that forms part of the answer. It seems a very distant response to the question you asked.
Well,
but
forgive me, that will be a matter for the panel.
Yeah.
But I'm just asking you whether you agree or you disagree with his general observation, which he clearly thought was relevant.
I agree with the fact that it is important to be consistent in training, especially in regard to risk-critical training. And I know one of the problems that London Fire Brigade has experienced for many, many years is a transition. So if you change a specific part of risk-critical training, the ability to be able to train and prepare the organisation for effectively a switchover date for that change to happen, because it is such a large organisation. So I would agree to that extent, yes.
Thank you. Let's look at your second witness statement, please. LFB 00118213, page 11. I just want to look, please, at paragraph 52A, B, and 53. I'll read them to you. You say at A, there were a number of elements to the process for changing training under the Babcock contract. A training, commissioning and alteration process, TCAP, would have to be submitted before any change would be made, and would therefore be a significant number of TCAPs in development at any one time. It was therefore difficult to make changes quickly. Issues arose when developing training to support the revalidation of incident commanders, as Babcock did not have the necessary subject experts to assist with training. I recall that there was an attempt by Babcock to combat this by seconding retired LFB officers to act as subject experts in developing this training. Amendments to training therefore had to be considered fully, and the proper process undertaken before LFB training would change, and this could take some time. The privatisation of the LFB's training under the contract with Babcock created inefficiencies within the LFB's training programme, particularly in terms of implementing changes to training. Babcock attended CMBs approximately every 6 months to discuss training. I understand that AC Ellis is considering the challenges faced under the Babcock contract in his witness statement. Now, you've identified a number of factors there. Did those factors, when combined, mean that there was a resistance within the LFB to undertaking a wholesale review of incident command training exclusively for the purposes of the Lakanal Coroner's Rule 43 recommendations?
No, not at all.
And what about the fact that Babcock's recommended fundamental review of incident command was continuing? Was that a problem?
No, I think that the only factors we identified here are the length of time it took to do anything.
Yes. And really what I'm driving at is whether all of those difficulties which you've identified, whether or not to do with Babcock, combined in the LFB's corporate mind to provide a degree of resistance to wholesale change.
No, I would say there was no resistance to wholesale change, just the fact that we had identified that change brought about difficulties and complications, and there were time issues involved in that.
On this topic, let's look at the ODCB meeting for March 2014 at LFB 000067808, please. This is a meeting of the ODCB of the 4th of March 2013 at Union Street, as you can see. That's the agenda there. And if we look at page 2, we can see the minutes, and we can see who was present, and we can see that you, in fact, I think, were not present for that. But Graham Ellis was from Operational Assurance. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
If we go to page 7, paragraph 10.3, we can see there, under the heading Any Other Business, it says this. DACOA advised that Babcock Training had requested that they attend the weekly ORT meetings. It was agreed by the board that Babcock Training should not attend ORT meetings, but that the GM Incident Command would meet bi-weekly with a Babcock Training representative to discuss generic issues around Incident Command training. Do you know what had given rise to Babcock's request for attendance at the weekly ORT meetings?
I suspect it was because one of the members of Babcock training was a retired London Fire Brigade officer who had been an ORT officer and in fact had led the ORT team, and I suspect that he had suggested that, but I don't know for a fact.
Know. Who was that person?
There were two. There was Dean Johns and Rick Nicol, to my recollection.
Rick Nicol?
Yes, he was one of the Babcock's trainers.
Do you know why the board decided against Babcock joining ORT meetings?
I think that the reason was that a number of confidential issues would be discussed at those meetings regarding performance of officers and crews at on the fire ground, and that would not be an appropriate meeting to have an external body at, but that the key issues identified in those meetings relating to operational issues could then be shared with them by the group manager in charge of the ORT team.
Right. Was there no way in which you could have avoided or got around the issues of confidentiality just simply by redacting the names from the performance review of command or performance review of operations reports or in your discussions?
No, this was mainly verbal meeting where conversations were had with the ORT officers about the incidents they had attended in the previous week, and therefore would have heavily relied on being able to identify individual teams and crews. So it would not have been appropriate to have an external body there.
Right. Was any consideration given to your knowledge about how to avoid or minimise those perceived confidentiality problems?
There were real confidentiality issues that I imagine would have been subject to conversation. Unfortunately, I wasn't present here, but I know that the key takeaway from that was the fact that the issues identified in relation to operational training could be shared via the group manager with Babcock's.
Now, you can see in the text there that the GM Incident Command, is that Group Manager Incident Command?
That is, yes.
Would meet bi-weekly with a Babcock training representative to discuss generic issues around incident command training. What was the problem that the ODCB thought that these bi-weekly meetings would solve?
I don't think there was a problem. I think that it was more about sharing information with our training provider to give them a real flavour of the relevant and current issues that might be being encountered by crews in their day-to-day operational management.
Would it not have been a good idea, even allowing for the confidentiality problems, to have helped Babcock understand or develop an understanding and indeed some degree of subject matter expertise of incident command issues by letting them come to the ORT meetings?
No, that would have been the role for the GM Incident Commander to share that, and in fact the people who were working for Babcock's were fully aware of and have an understanding. They were subject matter experts as they were retired London Fire Brigade officers.
Did those bi-weekly meetings between Babcock and GM Incident Command thereafter take place?
I don't know. I can imagine they would have done, but I can't confirm. I wouldn't have attended those.
Right. This was proposed as an OA matter by the DAC, this time Graham Ellis, as he was then a DAC. So this was within your department. Why don't you know whether or not the GM Incident Command bi-weekly meetings happened?
Because there would have been an inordinate range of meetings undertaken by members in my team. I wasn't fully aware of the detail. Graham Ellis, as the direct line manager of the group manager, would have been the one ensuring those meetings took place.
Now, this is an ODCB meeting minute. As a member of the ODCB at the time, although you weren't there, can we assume that you would have read the minute?
I would have done, yes.
Yeah. Can we assume that you would have read this part of the minute?
Yes, I would have done. And I would have had a conversation subsequently with Graham Ellis after the meeting, as he attended as my deputy.
Yeah, but you still don't know, as a result of reading the minute and that conversation, whether in fact these bi-weekly meetings took place.
I believe they did, but I can't confirm because I can't see the minutes, but I believe they did because Graham Ellis and I would have a conversation about the interface with Babcock training, so that was the means by which that happened.
You say you can't see the minutes. Do you know whether there were minutes?
I have no idea, sorry.
Did you ever ask to see the minutes?
No, I spoke to Graham Ellis about the issues that came up as he was the direct line manager for the group manager.
Peter Groves told us, and for reference purposes, this is day 177 at page 57, lines 2 to 25, and 58, line 3, that the TCAP process was generally reviewed within the brigade as cumbersome, and that he recommended to you during your time for Director for Safety and Assurance that there ought to be an external review or scrutiny of LFB's training commissioning processes, but you didn't agree to that. Is that right?
No, unfortunately, I did hear Peter Groves give that evidence. I would have welcomed with open arms anybody who could come and assist us, because it was such a difficult process and so very cumbersome. And as Peter's team was the one that was in charge of that, then he would have been able to commission that independent review without needing to get permission from me. Had he brought that request to me, I would have been more than happy for him to do that, because it was such a tortuously slow process and delayed everything. So that would have, anything to assist that would have been something I would have agreed to straight away.
You say you would have welcomed with open arms anybody who would come and assist you because it was a difficult process. Did you ever volunteer that as a suggestion yourself?
No, because we were reliably informed that Babcocks were doing everything they could to speed up the process, and that Peter Groves' team were the ones who were responsible for trying to facilitate that and to smooth it. And whenever we raised issues around the delays, and when I raised issues personally when I became the Director of Safety and Assurance with my colleague, representative colleague in Babcocks, we were regularly provided with updates that they were doing everything they could, but the volume of training that LFB were requiring and the amount of TCAPs was the issue.
Coming back to the point, though, not all training and not all TCAPs were addressing coroner's recommendations, were they?
No, absolutely not. Some of them were addressing other risk-critical training areas. Some of them were addressing vast subjects like breathing apparatus training. It was the volume of those and the ability of Babcocks to develop that training and provide subject matter experts across the piece that caused the delay.
Can you just help me with this? There are two aspects to commissioning new training, aren't there? One is the LFB side, what we call the TCAP process, and the other is the Babcock side. Babcock respond to the final TCAPs. Now, I quite see you've got difficulties with Babcocks, and there may be limited amount of pressures you can bring to bear there, but the suggestion that was made, I think by Mr. Groves, was that the LFB side could be streamlined a bit or made more efficient. Did anyone look into that?
I believe so, and I believe that Peter Groves and conversations I had with him as they were trying to make it more efficient, but actually having seen the TCAP process, it was a combined, from the moment the TCAP was submitted and the development of the TCAP was a process that a subject matter expert from the commissioning department the subject would be discussed. They would then work closely with the person in Peter Groves' team who were the ones who actually drew up the TCAPs because they understood the language, for want of a better word, of how that had to be worded. And they were then already working with Babcocks. So before the TCAPs were submitted, Babcocks were already included in that process. So it was a slow process, but there wasn't deemed to be any specific way, as Peter Groves told me, of speeding that up. So I am surprised by that suggestion, because if he had thought that there was someone who could have come in and assisted us, then that would have been something very beneficial.
I mean, did he suggest to you that the internal LFB process was cumbersome and could perhaps be improved?
It was a conversation we had. I recall actually sending that to him myself, saying that to him, that I believed that it was cumbersome. He told me that he believed that they had the best system that they could. So it was a difficult conversation if I'm asking him a question which he now appears to be reflecting, but I would genuinely have welcomed any external suggestion as to how we could improve that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Cotton, what about going to Babcock and telling them to prioritise all the training which was a response to the Lakanal Coroner's Rule 43 recommendations? Obviously, there's lots of training, but why not simply impose on them a prioritisation?
I'm not sure whether that was ever done by, obviously when this started off, it was Gary Reason, who was the Director for Training, who was overall responsible, who met with his counterpart. I'm not sure if that conversation was ever had. It would have been a good conversation, but I would not have been privy to that.
You are right, I think, so far as we've seen, that it didn't happen. My question really is why not? Given that was it not obvious that if the process of developing training as a response to the Lakanal Coroner's Rule 43 recommendations on incident command was being held up, bogged down because of the sheer volume of other training, simply to go to Babcock and say, never mind about grassland fires or whatever it was, please develop the training in response to the Lakanal House recommendations as a priority.
So the teams that would have been developing other operational aspects of training would have been a different team to that developed operational procedures. So the issue with Babcock's was the limited number of people they had that had any expertise in incident command to facilitate developing that training. We pressed them on numerous occasions because we understood the importance of incident command and responding to those recommendations, but they only had a very small team that were able with limited capability to develop those packages.
Did anybody look at the contract and go back to Babcock and say, well, you need to get more people? Or was that a problem of the absence of a pool of SMEs, subject matter experts, as between the LFB and Babcock?
I think it was Babcock's found it very difficult to attract and employ relevant subject matter expertise.
I'd like then to turn to national operational guidance, different topic. And I want to ask you specifically within that topic about the decision-making model and the decision control process. The inquiry has heard some evidence about that from Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton during Module 5. I think it's right, isn't it, that the decision-making model, or DMM, was the Brigade's framework model for decision-making at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire?
It was.
And it was enshrined, wasn't it, in LFB Policy 341?
It was.
And that was the process, was it, by which incident commanders were expected to make decisions at incidents?
Yes, it was.
Now, we heard from Dr. Cohen-Hatton that she had carried out and published some academic research in 2015 into the effectiveness of the DMM. And we went through Dr. Cohen-Hatton's research in great detail during her evidence. And I don't want to go through all that with you today or any day. But by way of brief overview, we heard that her research showed that most of the time incident commanders make decisions on an intuitive basis, drawing on past experiences rather than in the linear analytical way suggested by the policy, the DMM. And she told us, and this is by way of background to what I'm going to ask you, that while intuitive decision-making is not always a bad thing, the danger of training incident commanders using a linear model like the DMM is that it ignores the intuitive processes that ICs often use in reality. In other words, the DMM is not a real reflection of how people actually think at a real incident. She had developed something called the Decision Control Process, or DCP, which, in her opinion, better supported the way the decisions are made by commanders in reality. Now, that's a bit of a background speech by way of refresher for everybody and for you. It's right, isn't it, that the DCP, the Decision Control Process, was incorporated into National Operational Guidance for Incident Command published in July 2015 by the CFOA?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And can we take it that you were aware that the DCP was part of the 2015 National Operational Guidance at the time?
Yes, I was.
Yes. Now, Dr. Cohen-Hatton explained the findings of her 2015 research and a little bit more granularly that incident commanders were more likely to carry out explicit plan formulation, so explicit consideration of the implications of decision, weighing options against one another and then selecting the best course of action, and had better situational awareness when the DCP was applied rather than the DMM. That was what she found. Now, can I then show you against that background what the LFB published a few days after the publication of the National Operational Guidance, LFB 00110673. This is dated the 16th of July 2015, really a matter of days after, I think 2 days after the publication of the National Operational Guidance on the 14th of July. And if you go to page 3, under organisational impact, it says this: the Foundation for Incident Command, The Foundation for Incident Command document predominantly details the qualities and skill requirements for incident commanders and strategic arrangements that need to be implemented regarding selection, development, and assessment in order to achieve command competence. The contents of this document will need to be considered as part of the LFB review of command competence. As the author of much of the content and lead for the LFB review, this will be dealt with by DAC Cohen Hatton Learning and Development, Appendix 1, Item 1. And then if we turn the page to page 4, please, at the top, it says, and this is under the heading Incident Management Policy at the foot of the previous page, CFO Simon Piling, I think that should be Pilling, made it very clear at the Incident Command Conference that the decision control process does not replace the decision-making model, DMM, which will significantly reduce the potential impact of the guidance on LFB, as it is mentioned in and the foundation of many policies. The decision control process is an illustration of how incident commanders think and will therefore be a useful tool for selection and development, but should not lead to wholesale changes in the DMM or other policies. However, the decision controls, why, expectations and benefits, will be incorporated into the gathering and thinking, deciding area of the DMM policy. Appendix 1, Item 7. Now, you say in your witness statement, and I don't think we need to go back to it, it's page 7, paragraph 32, your second statement, that you don't recall who wrote this report. Is that still the case?
I've been led to believe, I think it was Lee Drawbridge, potentially, Group Manager.
You've been led to believe, but by a review of the documents, or did somebody tell you that?
I think it's in somebody's statement, I recall, from reviewing documents.
Right. Do you remember when you received... Well, first, I should ask you, do you remember reading this at the time, July 2015?
Not specifically. I remember a number of conversations with professional colleagues around the incident command aspect of NOG, but I don't specifically remember reading this document.
Do you remember, in general, when you received it, whether you agreed with the statement that the decision control process was, as it says, an illustration of how incident commanders think, but that it should not lead to a wholesale change in the DMM or other policies?
I remember in a conversation I had with a number of senior operational colleagues that had attended the Incident Command Conference that was what CFO Simon Pilling had said. Right.
So is this right? Your understanding or your view, being formed at the time, July 2015, doesn't come necessarily from an analysis of the words on the page here, but from discussions?
Yes, it does.
Yes, I see. Do you agree, or did you agree at the time, with the statement that the decision control process was not intended to replace the DMM?
That's what I was informed. I was not at the conference myself, but that was the information that was given to me by the colleagues that attended.
Do you know who did attend?
I think there were a number. I know for definite GM Drawbridge and DSC Ellis, and I think 2 or 3 other senior officers attended too, but I couldn't recall who they were, sorry.
Did you speak to Lee Drawbridge or Graham Ellis about what CFO Piling had said at the conference?
It is CFO Pilling, you were correct earlier. Yes, we had a conversation around the content of the conference and around specifically the conversation around the decision control process.
Dr. Cohen-Hatton told us that the first time she had seen the provisional impact report was when it was sent to her on the 12th of August 2015, about a month later, and that she'd not been consulted on its content before publication. First, do you know from your own recollection whether it's correct that she had not been consulted on its content before publication?
I don't know that, no.
You don't? On the assumption that she is correct, do you know why, given Dr. Cohen-Hatton's expertise in this area and her involvement in the development of the National Operational Guidance on this issue, nobody within the LFB sought to consult with her in relation to this report?
No, I don't.
They should have done, shouldn't they?
Yes, it would make sense. She was the subject matter expert.
You don't know why the LFB did not seek to involve Dr. Cohen-Hatton in the formulation of the LFB's response to the National Operational Guidance?
No, I'm not aware of that.
It would have been the obvious thing to do, wouldn't it, given that, as you say, she was the subject matter expert.
I would have thought so, yes.
She also told us that what is set out here on page 4 of the Provisional Impact Review was in fact a misinterpretation of what CFO Pilling had actually said at the Incident Command Conference. I'll just show you what she said. Day 185, page 46, please. If you look at that page at line 17, question, Simon Pilling chaired the National Operational Guidance Team's review. Yes. Do you know what he said at the Incident Command Conference about the DCP model? Answer at line 23, yes, I do. The point he was trying to make is that the decision control process was an evolution of the decision-making model itself. So it is a fundamental, if you turn the page, it is a fundamental, can we turn the page, please? Thank you. Fundamental piece of the National Operational Guidance. But the point that he was trying to make was that it was an evolution that incorporated some aspects of the decision-making model and more helpfully would illustrate how people think as well. What he wasn't suggesting was that it was simply an illustration or a picture, as the paragraph latterly refers to. This was a paragraph that I challenged when this report was circulated. That's what she says. Now, can we go then, in the light of that evidence, to LFB 00110678? LFB 00110678. Yes, thank you. Now, if we go to page 1 at the bottom, you can see, if you scroll down to the bottom, an email from Sabrina Cohen-Hatton of the 12th of August 2015 to Lee Drawbridge, you see that, and others, copied to, among others, you and Graham Ellis, yes?
Yes.
And she says, thanks, Lee. And the subject is Re-IC Provisional Impact Review. She says, I just want to make a point of clarity around the decision control process and the DMM, as I fear it might be easily misconstrued. It was one of the cornerstones of the new guidance, and so I think it's really important that the journey is understood. I appreciate there may be some resistance to this, given the work that has been done around the DMM in London, and I really just want to give some assurances. The point that CFO Pilling, the CFOA lead for command, and the lead of the National Op Guidance for IC was making at the conference was that the DCP is not a new construct that replaces the DMM, rather it is an evolution and an improvement of the DMM. It contains many of the same elements as the DMM, which will mean that there is not necessarily going to be an enormous impact in some respects. However, it is not simply intended to be an illustration of how people think. The point he was trying to make was that the DCP is structured, is intended to support incident commanders and brigades when decisions are scrutinised post-incident by being more representative of how people actually make decisions. Having done expert witness work on behalf of CFOA in relation to incidents involving FF fatalities, I know only too well how both barristers and the HSE will compare actions and statements to the extant guidance and how far away from reality such arguments can be. This was part of the learning that went into the guidance. In the case of the NOG, this will be the exemplar guidance that they go to, and the structure of the DMM did nothing to support, whereas the DCP explicitly aims to do so. Therefore, should we deviate from this, it will undoubtedly leave us in a very vulnerable position should our commanders' decisions be scrutinised following an incident. I've read you quite a lot of that. And then she goes on to say the second part around the decision control technique was about the research. Now, if we then go to the top of the email thread at the same day, we can see that you responded to her and you say, I think we need to meet to discuss this. I'm back later next week. And what you're responding to is a private email from her to you and Graham Ellis, sending on her wider response, in which she says, "Hi both, I didn't want to include it in the email to all, but the report on the future of Incident Command was approved last week by the Presidential Board and is being published and sent to all CFOs. The Commission is aware. Are the recommendations something we want to consider through this working group?" And as I say, you respond and tell her that you need to meet and discuss it. I'm back later next week. Now, Dr. Cohen-Hatton told us that you and she did meet. First, is that consistent with your recollection?
Yes, it is.
It is. She also told us that when she spoke to you, she repeated her concerns and expressed her disappointment that the LFB was not incorporating the DCP. I don't need to share it to you, but that's day 185, page 51, line 24 to 55, line 20. Do you agree with her account of the conversation?
We had a very detailed conversation. In fact, I had seen Dr. Cohen-Hatton present on her work earlier in 2015 at a Gold Command conference we both attended in Scotland, where we'd both been given presentations. So I had seen her presentation and had seen the level of detail and the work that had taken place, so I was familiar with the aspects of it. So we did have a meeting and we had an in-depth discussion about some of the concerns that had been raised by the Corporate Management Board about changes to Incident Command. So yes, I do recall meeting her and having her conversation.
Yes, and do you agree with her recollection, or does it accord with your recollection, that she repeated her concerns and expressed her disappointment that the LFB was not incorporating the DCP by way of divergence from the NOG, the National Operational Guidance?
Yes, she did. We had a very in-depth conversation, and that's the point when we discussed the fact that although there was some initial concern about the wholesale change that the DCP would bring, that we were very much supportive of the decision controls being incorporated in the first instance into the DMM, because we all recognise the absolute value of those as a method for assisting incident commanders in their decision making.
When she said to you that she was disappointed that the LFB was not going to incorporate the DCP, can you remember what you said?
Yes, the fact that I could understand her disappointment. She'd been very, obviously, heavily involved in the piece of work and was very invested in it, quite rightly, and had done, spent a lot of time in the academic research for it. So I completely understood that, and I tried to explain to her that, obviously the issue was that London Fire Brigade, as a large entity, had to agree things through the Commissioner's Board, and that they were the ones who would take the ultimate decision, but that I absolutely recognise the value of the work and the ability of the decision controls in the first instance to it was going to be much easier to implement those and to use those as a tool to assist incident commanders, and she understood that.
Did it concern you that Dr. Cohen-Hatton, who of course, as you I think accept, had considerable expertise on this topic and who had been involved in the production of the National Operational Guidance, felt that the LFB was making a mistake by not incorporating the DCP into its policy and its training?
Yeah, absolutely. I understood that she felt that way, but I felt that after we'd had the conversation, she was more understanding of why it was an issue, and that she understood how much value there'd be in the first instance in incorporating the decision controls.
I mean, you've given us the impression that what you told her was the difficulty of incorporating this because of the need to go to the Commissioner's Board to get it signed off. But
sorry.
Is that correct?
No, the fact that not to do with the sign-off, but the fact that we'd already had conversations because I was fully aware of this training, as were a number of other senior officers, and there had already been conversations around how difficult implementing such a large-scale change to operational incident command training would be. And I'd had that conversation with Gary Reason as well as with Graham Ellis.
Why was it such a large-scale change to operational incident command training? It was just simply amending a policy, the DMM, to incorporate the DCP aspects. Right?
Absolutely. Amending a policy is very simple. The training that then fall out of that would have to be designed by Babcock's as a result of a TCAP and then delivered to 1,700 staff would be a very different matter.
Oh, does that tell us that by August 2015 you were already suffering from a degree of, I'm not sure what the word would be, but experience fatigue with Babcock, such that with your experiences from the incident command training thus far, you knew it was going to be sluggish, slow, long, difficult, drawn out, even to incorporate into training Dr. Cohen-Hatton's suggested changes?
Very much so.
Right. Were you aware that Dr. Cohen-Hatton had attended the incident command conference at which CFO Simon Pilling had spoken?
Yes, I was.
You were. Did you discuss with her what Simon Pilling had actually said about the DCP?
Yes, we did.
Did you discuss with her whether or not the LFE might have misinterpreted him when recording what it had said in its provisional impact review?
I think that she and I agreed in the conversation we had that potentially the words that CFO Pilling had used were not as clear as she would have liked in order to demonstrate that point, and they were somewhat open to interpretation, is what she told me, because they weren't as direct as she would have liked them to have been. And she then could understand how both Lee Drawbridge and a number of other colleagues had reached that conclusion.
Right. Did you and she discuss the possibility of amending the paragraph recording what Simon Pilling had said at that conference so as to make it accurate?
No, I don't believe so.
Dr. Cohen-Hatton told us that you told her that the LFB would not be moving away from the DMM, and that you told her there needed to be a sufficient business reason to do so. That's what she said to us at day 185, page 53 at line 25 to 54, line 22. Again, I don't need to show that to you unless you want to see that. But do you recall using those words, business reason?
No, that wouldn't be a term that I would use. I think we probably would have had the detailed conversation around the organisational impact of changing training, which would have been a large-scale impact, but business reason was not a term that I would have used.
Right. So what was the... So I think what you're telling us in your answer there is that what you told her as the reason for not moving away from the DMN was the organisational impact of changing training, which would be large-scale.
That was part of the conversation, yes, but definitely that would have, and I was trying to clarify that point to her. I think that, the difference in changing the training in London Fire Brigade compared to other fire and rescue services was not only about the fact we were the only one to have an outsourced training provider, but the fact that we were the largest fire and rescue service and therefore had the greatest number of staff to deliver a significant training impact to, and that the conversation I think that we had earlier around the fact that you would need to ensure that all staff, incident commanders, were fully trained on that, because otherwise you could have people working to different decision-making models, which could cause confusion. And she fully understood that because she had recently started working for London Fire Brigade and had experienced the difference in working for a very large-scale organisation where training was a frustration to her because she was working in the training department.
Yes. Would I be right in summarising what you've told us in this way, that LFB's principal concern with incorporating the decision control process was that its implementation would be a fundamental change that would require too great an overhaul of the LFB's incident command training and policy, specifically training?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the key drivers. And I believe that in conversations that were taking place at the Corporate Management Board, that they were very interested to see how other larger fire and rescue services have managed to implement that training change and the impact that had, because, clearly that would give us an indication of what the impact would be. Right.
And was it also a factor that this was at a time, summer 2015, when a new suite of incident command training was nearing, or supposed to be nearing, rollout, at least for level 1 commanders?
Yes, it was.
And at a time when a year had gone by since the development and rollout of the Lacanal House training package?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you know who it was at the Brigade who took the ultimate decision not to implement the DCP?
It would have been a report to Commissioner's Board and a decision by the Board.
Right. So not ultimately your decision?
No, individuals would not make decisions on something risk critical like that. It would be the subject of a report, which would then go to a board for discussion.
As Director of Safety and Operational Assurance at the time, which I think you were by then, did you play any part in the decision? For example, did you make a recommendation to the CMB or CMT?
I think I was the Assistant Commissioner of Operational Assurance at that time, and therefore I would have presented the report, which I believe that I appended to one of my statements. So yes, I would have attended CMB for that.
Yes, and the reason I say Director of Safety and Operational Assurance is because I assume that ultimately the decision was made later. But in fact, at the time, August 2015, as you say, you were of course ACOA, but
Yeah.
You presented the report. Did you privately or publicly recommend what it was that the Provisional Impact Review said?
No, I didn't present the Provisional Impact Review. That wasn't my report. I did present a report later, I believe. But no, the way the conversation, as I recall, happened was that we had a very detailed conversation. Obviously, the attendees at CMB, a large number of them were very experienced senior operational officers. So the conversation around the impact to London Fire Brigade, the significant change, and I had spoken to them and given them a detailed update on the decision controls that I felt I believed could enhance the DMM, and that I was very keen that we could introduce those immediately. And I asked for Dr. Cohen-Hatton to work alongside Babcock's to ensure that happened.
Do you know when the decision was made not to incorporate the DCP by way of divergence from the National Operational Guidance?
I'm not sure exactly when it was made, no, sorry.
Right. Can I just ask you, in that context then, please, to go to your second statement, LFB 00118213, and look at page 3, paragraph 16A. And this is under the heading Work Streams in 2015-16. And you say there, the LFB was in ongoing discussions with Babcock regarding the training provided under its training contract. I recall that there were budgeting restrictions for training during 2016, and so work was carried out to establish which training programmes were to be prioritised. First, what were those budgeting restrictions?
As I recall, the terms of the contract, of the outsourced training contract with Babcock, were that over a number of years, the cost of the contract would be reduced, and therefore it was I think initially the plan was, and I wasn't party to the negotiations, so I'm not sure what was discussed, but that there would be a big number of a big amount of sort of contract involved in it, so there'd be far more money up front, and then that cost would reduce so that the contract effectively became cheaper, as I understood it. Therefore, any new training requirements had to be subject to a scrutiny process to understand how they fitted in with other training requirements, because there wasn't simply, when London Fire Brigade ran its training, you could ask for anything to be developed in any training package, and they would do that. But under the new processes with the outsourced training provider, that couldn't happen. There was something you saw earlier, which was training units, and there was a reducing number of training units available.
Sorry. You referred there to a scrutiny process. Who was responsible for operating the scrutiny process? Was that Babcock or LFB?
Sorry, I think I was speaking too fast then.
Oh, all right.
Indeed, the transcript has stopped, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, well, are you able, do you know what the problem is?
I think it's just crashed and we need to reboot the laptop.
Does that take very long?
I can just try it now.
All right, thank you. You've sourced it out, have you? Well done. Thank you very much indeed. Can you pick up that question?
Yes, I think I can, Mr. Chairman. Can I go back, please, Ms. Cotton, and ask you about what you referred to as a scrutiny process at line 14 on the last page in the raw transcript? Scrutiny process. Who was responsible for running that scrutiny process? Was that the LFB, or was that Babcock, or was that joint?
It was a joint venture.
Right. And the scrutiny process, was this designed to ensure, is this right, that the cost of training was available to meet the training requirements?
So the training was provided in training units, and the number of training units would be reducing. So what the process was to decide which training was necessary and to work on a prioritisation order for training, because it wasn't simply the case anymore that you could request a new development or new training as a result of a new policy or equipment or a procedure. It had to go through a process to be decided upon, because there was this reduction in the number of training units available.
Was that always contemplated from the start of the contract?
I believe so, but I wasn't part of the contract negotiation.
So just help me with this. Was it the case that the way the Babcock contract worked was that the later on in the contract you got, the less money there was available for training, and therefore the more selective you had to be about what you asked Babcock to train on?
As I understood it, I think that the idea was that that they believed that training needed streamlining, and that the plan was that the Babcocks would provide, in their words, new and innovative ways of delivering training that would not be so resource and trainer intensive, and therefore effectively the training units were about developing training and delivering training, and that they would be able to make that process simpler, and therefore the requirement would be reduced.
When you say make the process simpler and therefore the requirement will be reduced, do you mean make the training less rich and therefore cheaper?
Well, that's one way. I mean, I was not part of that negotiation that agreed with that, so I found it difficult, because I found it difficult having a outsourced training provider when we had always had the ability to be able to flex and develop new training with our own internal training team. But so unfortunately, I wasn't aware of the detail or part of that training negotiation.
Right. To your recollection, did anybody ever go to Babcock and seek to amend the contract so that there was enough money available to Babcock in order to carry into effect LFB's training needs, whatever they were?
I'm not sure. That would be a question for the Commissioner.
Right. Nonetheless, the restrictions that you're referring to here in your second statement, did they play any role in the decision not to implement national operational guidance on the DCP?
It was more the factor of definitely how long the experience had been in already the development of incident command training, and the fact that introducing such a large-scale change, that we recognise that would be a significant impact.
So I think the answer is yes. Because of the scale of the training changes needed in order to introduce DCP to bring it in line with national operational guidance, you would run up against a budget problem with Babcock.
And the development and the subject matter expertise and the skills to be able to change the training.
So, cost, absence of SMEs, and related skills to change the training.
And time, definitely time.
And the delay, you mean?
Yes.
Right. Let's look at your second statement, then, slightly different aspect of DCP, please. Second statement, page 7, paragraph 34. You say there, it's page 7, paragraph 34. Thank you. I understand that DAC Co in Hatton had considered that the DCP should be universally adopted following the Incident Command NOG. However, as I've mentioned, when considering the extent to which the DCP should be implemented at the LFB, there was concern that an EIA, an Equality Impact Assessment, had not been carried out, which could mean that the DCP was inaccessible for individuals with learning difficulties, and the DCP had not been tested on level 3 and 4 incident commanders. There was also concern around the extent to which DCP had been tested in operational situations. It is important that the LFB considers fully any amendment to operational policy, and therefore it is prudent that we explore any implications fully before doing so. I recall that discussions took place with the Commissioner Ron Dobson. However, I've been unable to recall or identify specific evidence of these discussions. You raise a number of concerns in that passage, Ms. Cotton, which I just want to take in turn. Before I do, you say that these concerns existed. It's the word you use. Were they your concerns?
No, these were shared concerns of senior operational officers.
And concerns in which you shared?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Now, you mentioned discussions with Ron Dobson. What was his involvement, if any, in the decision not to implement the DCP?
As part of the corporate management board, he would clearly, well, he chaired the corporate management board, so he would have been involved in that decision process.
You raise, as we see from this paragraph, the concern that an equality impact assessment had not been carried out, which I think you say meant that the DCP was inaccessible for individuals who had learning difficulties. Now, Dr. Cohen-Hatton agreed in her evidence that, as a fact, there had been no EIA carried out in relation to the DCP, nor indeed in relation to the National Operational Guidance more generally. Were you concerned about the lack of an EIA in relation to any other elements of the NOG, the National Operational Guidance, or only in respect of the DCP?
Oh, in every policy that we changed, in every single policy, every document, every report that went to Corporate Management Board, an equality impact assessment was considered. And as the board are aware that, it's a legal requirement to carry that out. So I asked Dr. Cohen-Hatton very early on if she could share the details, because I understood that would have happened as part of a development of National Operational Guidance of an EIA, and she said at that time it hadn't been completed.
Was there any reason why you or anybody else in the brigade didn't simply ask for an EIA to be carried out in relation to the DCP?
That's
or the
what I
NOG
asked.
more widely?
Sorry, that's what I asked Dr. Cohen-Hatton for.
You asked her to do it, did you?
She had been the one who had undertaken the research and the development, so it would have been impossible for someone who hadn't been involved in that to have conducted the EIA without the subject matter expertise that the people involved had.
Right. So just to be clear, did you ask Dr. Cohen-Hatton to carry out an EIA?
I asked her if one had been conducted and if she could provide me with one in relation to the Incident Command NOG.
Who would be responsible within the brigade for carrying out an EIA on this aspect of the National Operational Guidance?
So my understanding was that any National Operational Guidance should be published with an EIA. So that will be the National Operational Guidance team who had designed the training, or designed the policy.
And who was... So the National Operational Guidance team, where did this team sit in the brigade structure?
So in London Fire Brigade housed National Operational Guidance. It was a national body. So each guidance that was reviewed and developed would come with an EIA. So in this case, it would have been the team that developed the Incident Command NOG, which Dr. Cohen-Hatton was a part of, and CFO Simon Pilling, and a number of others.
Right, and just help me, in which directorate, let's start with directorate, did that team sit?
So the overall management of the NOG team was done nationally by CFO and the NFCC. We, London Fire Brigade, housed the NOG team in London Fire Brigade, and it sat in the strategy and policy Susan St Bunce's team, which sat under, at that time, I believe, Sue Budden.
Oh, right, I see. So not the operational team and not your team?
No.
I see. So it would be Sue Budden's directorate and the services or groups within her team that would have been responsible for carrying out the EIA?
No, sorry, I'm probably not making myself very clear. No, the National Operational Guidance was the sort of body of it was housed in London Fire Brigade, but it was made up of teams of people from all around the country, from different fire and rescue services. As Dr. Cohen-Hatton was part of that team at the time, she didn't work for London Fire Brigade. And when that new training was, new policies were developed by those national teams, that's when the EIA should have taken place.
Yes, what I'm really trying to work out is who was responsible for carrying out the EIA in respect of any change coming from the National Operational Guidance. And you mentioned a team.
Yeah, so Dr. Cohen-Hatton, I would have expected her to have provided an EIA with that piece of work.
So you would have expected her to do it, carry it
Her
out.
or the team, yes, that she was working with.
I think we're at cross purposes here. If I've understood you correctly, the National Operation Guidance team is independent of London Fire Brigade, but sits in an office provided by London Fire Brigade.
That's correct, sir.
Right. What Mr. Millett would like you to tell us is who within London Fire Brigade would have been responsible for carrying out an EIA if it had decided to adopt the DCP into its policies.
I get the question, sir. So once it had been adopted into a London Fire Brigade policy, that would be conducted by the team that owned that policy in London Fire Brigade. So in this case, it would have been operational assurance. But before it came in as a policy to be adopted, when it was the guidance, that should have come with an EIA as part of the publication of the guidance.
Yeah, and I understand that, but it didn't.
No, it didn't, no. And therefore, I asked Dr. Cohen-Hatton if she could provide that for me.
Right.
Right, but in her capacity, is this right, as a member of the NOG team rather than as an employee of the LFB?
Yes, that's correct.
I follow. And what did she tell you in response?
She said to me that hadn't been done and she would look at it.
It hadn't been done and she would look at it, and what did you say to her?
Thank you.
And it never came?
I understood it did come, I think, in 2016, 2017, I think, under Steve Apter. I believe that Dr. Cohen-Hatton spoke to Professor Honey, who she had worked with, which was some year, 18 months later, and then that information was provided.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes.
We will come back to this topic after lunch, I'm afraid.
All right. Well, that's a good point anyway. Thank you very much. Well, I think we'll break now so we can all have some lunch, Ms. Cotton. We'll come back at 2:05, please. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Thank you,
All right?
sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Millett. 2:05, please. Thank you.